Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the regular meeting of Los Angeles City Council's Planning and Land Use Management Committee. We're joined by our esteemed Director of Planning, Mr. Vince Bertoni, along with committee members, Vice Chair Bob Blumenfeld from the San Fernando Valley, along with Mr. Greg Smith, also from the San Fernando Valley. My name is Marquise Harris-Dawson. I represent District 8 and serve as the chair of this committee. We'll begin this meeting, as we do all meetings, with folks who have requested to speak on general public comment on any issue that this committee has jurisdiction over. If you submitted multiple cards, we'll give you a total of 2 minutes to speak when we call you, so you might come up on multiple issues. And so our first speaker for 2 minutes will be Mr. Eric Previn, followed by Marta Cross, Yolanda Ezel, and Lisa Lewis. What did I say? That's a big deal. Marquise.
Thank you, sir. It's Eric Previn from Studio City. And I take note of the home sharing item. And, you know, there's been a great deal of frustration. I know you weren't there, but many of us were out in the valley. Tons of people came down, home sharers, concerned about the attenuation of these regulations, and in particular about their ability to, they're being charged $850 at the 120-day mark for the part 2 of that permit fee, which seemed very onerous for some of those people who are keeping themselves afloat through this process. And also the question about whether or not you're allowed to put a one occupant, you know, in a place, as opposed to, for example, renting. If I went into my one room and rented out the rest of my place to a family. So I think that has to be clarified, because otherwise, if you have kind of a gray area there and it's not clear that you can do that, you're going to run into the possibility of people being incentivized to go outside the rules. And so that's my comment on home sharing. And in general public comment, which I'll deliver now, I just want to take a moment to call out Greg Smith, who for many years worked at Waste Management as a lobbyist. First, he was a CD12 council member. Then he went to work as a lobbyist. He took $180,000 from Waste Management. Now, you may know, Councilmember Price, Blumenfield, there's a lifetime ban on doing that, but he did it with somebody's permission. And then he has the gall and the kind of audacity to run a committee. I believe it's the ITA committee upstairs. And this guy, imagine a room full like this, people come down to give their testimony. He waits till somebody walks outside of the door and then closes the public comment. There were only 2 people speaking that day. So I would call it extremely cowardly, and I would call it embarrassing, frankly. And I would ask that Greg Smith simply resign immediately, because he is a total loser. And thank you, sir. Have a great day.
All right, we're going to keep the applause down. I called 3 other people in general public comment. If they'll come forward for their 1 minute. If not, we'll assume that you're not here. Wayne from Encino, Alexis Smith, and Doug Bayless, I believe this is. Mr. Wayne Spindler will have a total of 2 minutes for all the items that you've signed up for.
That's right. And don't let them talk. Can I have 2 minutes, fool? I only got 57 seconds on the clock. So that's why somebody speak against my daddy, Greg Smith. That's right. He had the kid with my mama. I'm my daddy. So they're going to talk about shit about Greg Smith, and they're going to be talking about my family and my sister Alexis. We both his kids. I want to get my goddamn child support from this dude. He can't step down. So
You want to stay on topics that this committee has purview over?
He making
of which child support is not one of them?
We're talking about housing, and we're talking about sharing apartments. That's what we're doing for. So we want to be able to share our fucking apartments with anybody we want to get paid. That's what we want. We want to be able to give our room out and give a shout out and get paid by any motherfucker we want. And because of the crazy clock, fool, I get another minute, fool. That's right, he back again. So that's why my daddy came back here to be on the council to control you Jew motherfuckers and other white motherfuckers to let us rent our rooms out with the air and the B and the B food. That's right. And we got the BB to the Airbnb, and I'm part of the BBB. I am BB and DB rated to get my BB. And that's why I need my foo-foo to get my money so that I can rent my shit and get paid. And then what I did too is I gave you, Mr. Dawson, I put the money in the bag, fool. Now where's my contribution bag? You making all these rules. So later on, talk to my daddy, Greg Smith. He your daddy too, fool. And we're going to get our Airbnb, and we're going to make money and not pay any taxes.
That's your time.
Made you an updated copy? I don't know. When did you print yours out?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, sorry, I'm Yolanda Ezel. Did you call my name?
Yes, I did.
I lost my train of thought, but sorry. Well, basically, I'm an Airbnb.
You want to get a little closer to the mic?
Okay, I'm an Airbnb host, and I want to say I spent my entire life working to get to the American dream of owning a house here in California, where it's extremely expensive. The property taxes are over $1,000 a month, and there's been multiple occasions where I've almost lost my home, whether it be from getting laid off from work or from the rates changing back in 2008, where my mortgage went up like $3,000. And it just seems like if we pay taxes and we own a home, that we should have the right to take matters into our own hand, obviously not in any way that would break the law, where we would be able to make money and be able to, you know, save our home, change our lifestyle, not just like the large hotels.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Lisa Lewis. Am I next?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to just comment about my confusion over a possible registration issue with the home sharing ordinance. I have been running my private residence as both an Airbnb and vacation rental because I have a guest house that I've moved into on my property that's part of my private residence. And so last year, half of the income came from Airbnb and half came from vacation rental. I've been to a number of these sessions and have not been able to determine the difference between those two, but it seems like I qualify for both. So I wanted to make sure that that was out there as a confusion for registration purposes.
Thank you. So we have an item on home sharing coming up. I'll ask that staff pay attention to the comments that we're getting, but also note that we need you to sign up on that item. As opposed to talking about it in general public comment. Yes.
I'm on that item. I couldn't find it on the agenda. If you'd like, I could go and change.
It's there, yeah.
Would you prefer that I speak later? Or?
Yeah, you should speak on that item. Because in general public comment, we only speak on items not on the agenda. Thank you. All right, I think this exhausts our general public comment speakers. Mr. Mejia, we have requests for a number of items to be continued. The first of which is items number 2 and 3 to be continued to June 25th, 2019. Items 4 and 5 to be continued to June 25th as well. Item 6 to be continued until July 30, 2019. Without objection, those continuances will be the order. We have item number 9, if we could jump to that, Mr. Mejia. We have one public comment speaker.
Sure. Item 9, Councilman, this is a report from the North Valley APC. It relates to a vesting zone change. It's basically, let me see, for the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and the construction of a medical office building.
So this is
Appeal also.
one development, and I believe that we're making a.
There's an appeal associated with it as well, Councilman.
Okay. So we'll hear from staff.
Yes.
Good afternoon, council member. Is it on? Good afternoon, council members. So the project consists of the demolition of an existing.
Can you tell us your name and?
Oh, sorry. Christine Bustillos, planning assistant with the city planning department.
Thank you.
So the project consists of the demolition of a single-family dwelling and the construction of a 9,304 square foot medical office building and associated surface parking lot. The site is in the vicinity of other medical office buildings and a hospital at the intersection of Roscoe Boulevard and Etiwanda Avenue. There are single-family dwellings adjacent to the north and west of the project site. On March 21st, 2019, the North Valley APC went with the recommendation of the Planning Department and adopted the associated mitigated negative declaration. They approved and recommended that City Council adopt a vesting zone change from RS-1VL to TQC2-1VL. They approved and recommended that City Council adopt a building line removal of the 25-foot building line on Roscoe Boulevard, and they disapproved a waiver of dedication and improvement, or WDI, to allow relief from a 5-foot dedication on Roscoe and a 3-foot dedication on Etiwanda. The APC didn't make any changes to the staff report, and the applicant has appealed the APC's disapproval of the WDI. Staff wasn't able to make the required findings in order to approve the WDI. There's an existing 10-foot right-of-way on Roscoe and a 10-foot right-of-way on Etiwanda, both of which include sidewalk and parkway. The dedications would be used to widen the sidewalk by 5 feet on Roscoe and by 3 feet on Etiwanda, which would further the intent and policies of the recently adopted mobility plan and would increase accessibility for users of all transportation modes and ability levels. Wider sidewalks are important for increased accessibility for pedestrians going to and around the site. The dedications and improvements are a standard part of development in the city, and they are applicable to both by right projects and projects with discretionary entitlements. No evidence has been submitted to the file to indicate that the dedication is physically impractical at the site. The site is level, and there are no physical constraints such as topographic features or protected trees, which would make the dedication physically impractical or infeasible. And as such, as staff wasn't able to make the required findings to recommend approval of the WDI.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
The appellant?
Yes.
The appellant is here, I think.
Okay, but I just want to make sure you
Oh,
got
yeah.
no questions or comments
Yeah,
for staff?
I support the appeal, and Mr. Armbruster will make an amendment to it that we would support.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Department of City Planning staff. We'll hear from the appellant at this moment for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mark Armbruster with Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delbeck, representing the appellant. Actually, contrary to planning's report, in all due respect, we believe that the findings can be made. Requires any one of 3 findings to be made. We think we make all the findings. We've submitted those to you for the record, so I won't go through each one of those individually. But I also would like to note that one of the findings is that you would not be able to meet the mobility plan for an extended period of time for 20 years or more. I want you to know that up and down the streets to the adjacent properties are all residentially zoned, so they're not subject to to the dedications and improvement requirement. and thus would not happen for decades or decades, if ever. So again, we believe the findings have been made. Also, it would be very impractical not to grant this because this is a relatively small project, and taking this amount of land makes it totally impractical. So we urge you to grant the appeal and the waiver of dedications and improvements. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Smith?
Yes, so as I said, I think we support the appeal with the recommendations that were made by Mr. Armbruster and support it.
Excellent. So, Mr. Mejia, we have language
Yes.
consistent with what Mr. Smith is putting forward, which I second.
That's correct, Councilman. Do you want me to read
Yeah,
it?
if you could read that into the record.
To the record. So it'll be a granting of the appeal by Daniel Kashani, and thereby overturn the North Valley APC's determination in approving the waiver of street dedication and improvements for the project at 18301 Roscoe Boulevard, and accept the findings and support the approval of the waiver and street dedication and improvements.
Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. I think the appellant applicant indicated that findings were submitted to the record. Have all the council members had a chance to review them? And are you adopting these findings as the findings to support the
Yes.
granting of the appeal?
Yes, that's the case. All right, hearing no objection, that'll be the order. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to city planning staff. We'll go to item number 1. Mr. Mejia?
Yes, item 1, Councilman, this is Mr. Bertoni's weekly report.
Thank you, Chair Harris Dawson, members of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I'm actually I don't have a report this week. I will be having one next week when we have our updated quarterly housing numbers, but given the size of the agenda today, I'll defer.
Thank you. Such discretion. We appreciate you. Item number 7.
Councilman, sorry to interrupt you. Going back to the prior item, the Planning Department wants me to indicate for the record that the zone change was also before you, and that was also being approved by this committee.
So noted.
Thank you, Council.
Item number 7.
Item 7, Councilman, is a motion by Councilman Blumenfield, seconded by Mr. Smith. It's instructing the Planning Department and the City Attorney to prepare a report and potentially an ordinance to regulate sober living facilities in the city.
All right, we have a report from Department of City Planning on this.
Good afternoon, Tom Rothman from the Planning Department. We do not have a report today. This is simply a motion that's being directed to the staff, so I can answer some basic initial questions, but we have not prepared. This is
all right. So we have some discussion from members. For the record, we've been joined from the heart of the city and the 9th Council District by members and former Senators Gil Cedillo and Kern Price to make a full complement of Plum Committee members. Mr. Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. As was mentioned, this is just to get the ball rolling, to get the information here. But this is an important issue for my community for sure, and I know for lots of others throughout the city. Addiction treatment is a very important medical need. We've got residential treatment facilities can provide a needed service in this environment. And a lot of these facilities go forward and they're unnoticed and they do a good job. However, there are others that do not and have a lasting impact on the neighborhoods and sadly sometimes have a negative impact on the patients themselves. I believe it's time that we need to look at this issue again to try to figure out what we can and cannot do. I get very frustrated as a council person. We have, especially after the fires, we had a number of facilities moved to Woodland Hills, and the community says we've got to do something. We're having these community problems, and we're very limited in what we can do because of state and federal rules. But there are certain things that we can do. But as we look into it, we get a lot of fingers pointing in different directions. So I thought it was important to move this forward so that we can comprehensively look at it and see what we can and can't do, if there are ordinances that we can deal with to deal with issues of overconcentration, but to get it all down for the record. So that's what the purpose of this is. And before I ask you to support me in moving this item forward, I want to propose a few additional items for this report. Number one is, and I don't think any of them are controversial, but number one is having Building and Safety and LABD report on the number of calls for service related to these facilities. Two is to request Building and Safety that they coordinate with planning on zoning and building code questions. Three is to request the fire department coordinate on questions related to occupancy. Four is to add a question asking for recommendations on issues related to administrative uses by these facilities that are not related to direct patient care and within residential zones. And finally, last, to request that the report back be returned to us within 90 days. And these questions came out of a lot of discussions we've been having with stakeholders and community groups and in trying to figure out what is what. So I would ask that these be amended after you.
All right, we have some public comment on this matter. Susan Domkowski, Jason Robison, Greg Spiegel, J.D. Kalmanson, and Bill Prisluki.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Domkowski from Disability Rights California. We are the protection and advocacy organization for California, protecting the rights of people with disabilities. We are concerned about this effort to regulate and ban the housing for people with the shared housing for people with disabilities. Earlier in this decade, our organization joined a coalition of over 150 organizations to oppose a regressive proposed ordinance regarding sober living homes and other shared housing for people with disabilities that would have eliminated thousands of affordable and supportive units. We urge the city to work with Disability Rights California, affordable housing advocates, and other leaders in our coalitions so the mistakes made earlier this decade are not repeated. All of our time can be better spent if we work together to try to solve solutions to the city's housing problems that don't endanger or violate the rights of people with disabilities. And I have letters here to hand out from our organization.
Thank you, council members. Jason Robison with Share, the Self-Help and Recovery Exchange. Nice to see you.
And of the which district?
CD9, absolutely. West Adams Neighborhood Association, proudly here. So one thing that's really important, shared recovery housing is an evidence-based best practice identified by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Any report that is looking to quantify best practices, I would sincerely hope includes research into the existing body of evidence that's compiled mainly by Lenny Jason at DePaul University that demonstrates best practices. One of the things that's very important in this area is what's happening with sober homes is not necessarily treatment, it's social support. It's people living together in a community where they get to have meaning and purpose in that community. And please make sure you follow the best practices. Thank you.
Greg Spiegel, Inner City Law Center. Councilmember Blumenfield, apologies if we might appear a bit alarmed to you, but this was something that 7 years ago, 8 years ago came up, and it took a ton of resources to get it right. What we found is that the city attorney didn't properly understand the complex fair housing issues. Understandable, but it got going. Planning department didn't accurately understand it. Every other city department did. So we'd like to see other city departments part of this, such as housing, Department of Disabilities, things like that. This went wrong a million ways, and we had to get Manat Phelps to do pro bono opinions showing how the city attorney was wrong. The process cut us out of it. It was very negative. I know that's not your style. Please consult. There was a gigantic coalition of unions and Chamber of Commerce and neighborhood councils, everybody except the handful that was supporting it. So please let's not go down that road again. We'd love to meet and talk to you so that we don't make the mistakes that were made last time. Thank you.
Bill Prislecki, People Organized for Westside Renewal, reiterating the same comments you just heard from Greg Spiegel and our other colleagues who are here. We were part of those discussions. We were part of the last couple times that this idea has been floated, and we strongly urge you to work with the huge coalition of organizations of folks who care about issues about homelessness, about affordable housing, and come back and work with us. Don't go down the road again of cutting community-based groups out of these conversations.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I have some letters if I'd like to pass on to just have more information than I'll be able to share in these few moments. As a treatment provider in the San Fernando Valley, we have boutique family treatment centers.
I'm sorry, can you tell us your name and then start?
J.D. Kalmanson, co-founder of Renewal Health Group. I wanted to just communicate something that is I feel missing from the discussion, not as it pertains to the sober livings, but as it pertains to the DHCS licensed facilities, the treatment centers. The DHCS regulates them for 6 beds per address, per home, per treatment center, and that has worked in the past, but unfortunately several things have come up as it pertains to the insurance and as it pertains to the model of running them that make it very complicated and put us in a predicament where they cut the authorization and our ability to provide service for people is
Finish your sentence.
So we used to have 30 days to be able to provide treatment. Now they're cutting that down to 15 days to 20 days. So the predicament is, what do we do? Do we send them onto the streets early, prematurely, or do we provide this at basically no reimbursement, which is a big dilemma for us, to stay open or to provide quality care?
Thank you. Okay, that's more than a sentence. Thank you.
Okay.
That's your time. I appreciate you. All right, Mr. Blumenfeld.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, just wanted to emphasize, one of the speakers was saying this is an effort to ban sober living, and it is nothing of the sort. This is an effort to get information to figure out who does what, and there is a lot of good information out, and to look into what our abilities are to work with this and to bring all the stakeholders together. I would also say, we talked about the city attorney last time. We have a very different city attorney this time around, and it's not an old proposal. There is no proposal here. This is the idea of how do we deal with these issues that are coming up that affect both patients, patient care, and our quality of life issues, and where do we fit in with the different layers? Because as was mentioned, there's a lot that the city cannot do because it's either the space is taken up by the state or the feds. So this motion gets us that information, puts it all in one place, and allows us to look at the options. There's no actual ordinance being proposed. It's asking for recommendations, and that's where we go from here. So I ask for your aye vote with the amendments.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. It's up for consideration. Hearing no objection. That'll be the order. Thank you so much. And that takes us to item number 8.
Item 8, Councilman, this is a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst. It relates to the reappropriation of TFAR monies in the amount of $2.25 million for various projects located in CD9. The staff from the CLA's office is present.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alex Whitehead with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst.
Pull the mic just a touch closer.
Sure thing. On July 3rd, 2018, the City Council approved the CLA report to the TFAR Public Benefits Trust Fund Committee, dated May 16th, 2018, that, among other things, provided recommendations for the allocation of all previously distributed monies held in the trust fund for 31 projects and programs, as recommended by Council District offices eligible for these funds. Among the projects and programs awarded funds are the following 4 for a total of $2,250,000. Casa de Rosas Affordable Housing, La Opinion Affordable Housing, Florence Mills Murals, and People Streets at Paul Williams Apartments. Motion, Price Harris Dawson, notes that subsequent to the approval of these projects, changes to the scope of work and public benefit to be provided by the Casa de Rosas and La Opinion Affordable Housing projects were identified. Separately, there's an interest to reallocate funds designated for the Florence Mills Murals and People Streets at Paul Williams Apartments towards other eligible projects and programs in Council District 9. The motion was approved by City Council on April 17, 2019, allowing for the 4 project approvals to be rescinded. As a result, the money's reverted back to the trust fund for reallocation. The following projects have been proposed by Council District 9 to receive the $2,250,000 from the TFAR Trust Fund that had been previously allocated to the 4 since rescinded projects in Council District 9. The Casa de Rosas Job Training and Outreach Program, the La Opinion Job Training and Outreach Program, and Public Arts Funding in Council District 9. These projects and programs have been assessed by the CLA and City Planning in order to establish eligibility. All proposed projects reside within at least one of the 2-mile radii of a receiver site and have been evaluated to serve a public benefit as listed. A summary of these proposed projects is also available in the report. I'm available for any questions the members may have.
Mr. Price?
Just want to move approval of the recommendations. This is an important resource for projects in the district, and look forward to the approval. Thank you.
Excellent. It's been moved. I'll second. Any other discussion, members? There are no public comment speakers on this matter. So hearing no objection, that'll be the order. That'll take us to item number 9.
Item 9, Councilman, we already considered.
Sorry, we already did hear 9.
However,
Sorry,
Councilman.
Mr. Mejia, I took 9 out of order earlier, and now it's coming back to haunt me. Item number 10.
Just one more caveat, modification to number 9. If we could also indicate for the record that the building line removal is also being approved.
So in order to do that, council members, you need to move to reconsider the item, clarify the action, and then move forward. So.
All right, there's a motion to reconsider. Mr. Blumenfield seconds. Hearing no objection, now we'll take this up again. Take up item number 9 with the additional.
Yes, to clarify the building line removal, the addition of that was because it was approved. In essence, with the zone change, the building line removal, and the granting of the appeal.
All right, we're putting forward such a clarification and considering the item again.
Yes.
Hearing no objection, that'll be the order.
Thank you.
We can move to item number 10.
Yes, and now item number 10, council members, this is a report from the City Planning Commission. It's a proposed ordinance as it relates to amendments to the Central City West Specific Planning Council Districts 1 and 13.
All right.
Good afternoon, Craig Weber, City Planning staff. The item before you pertains to an amendment to the Central City West Specific Plan, a specific plan that is in effect just west of the immediate downtown area. The specific plan adopted in the late 1980s contains an inclusionary housing provision that was in effect up until several years ago when that specific provision was struck down through the courts, and then was brought back into effect through a subsequent change in state law. So the inclusionary housing provision is now in effect. The amendment clarifies the manner in which that inclusionary housing provision works with existing citywide housing linkage fees and other in lieu fees, and also provides a rephasing in of the inclusionary housing requirement to allow the development community to adjust to the otherwise new requirement. I can answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cedillo, we have some public comment. Would you like to hear that first, or would you like to address staff?
I'd like to hear public comment first. Please.
Public comment first. Okay, so we have Michael Shillstone, Michael Lutz, and Ryan Lederman for 1 minute each.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Shillstone with the Central City Association, an organization dedicated to enhancing the vibrancy of greater downtown LA and investment in its growth. We would like to thank Councilmember Cedillo for addressing the inconsistencies between the Central City West Specific Plan's affordable housing provisions and citywide and state policies. We're supportive of the amendments, and we appreciate the thoughtful, phased approach that will provide certainty for projects already filed and for those to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Ryan Lederman from Holland & Knight.
So I want to thank the councilman especially for this ordinance. A number of projects in Central City West have been held up as a result of the inclusionary housing requirement. And so this really helps move forward literally thousands of dwelling units that the market desperately needs. So we especially want to thank the councilman and the committee for moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see our last speaker. So Mr. Cedillo.
This matter was before us, and I think it has to be discussed in the context of this proposal and then our proposal that you and I have fashioned. I'm excited that we're going to have a set amount of affordable housing that's going to be in projects. It's going to be phased in, so this is not something that the developer community will be caught off guard on. But at the same time, as I said last time to my dear colleagues who were here in front of us, Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Smith, there's a need for this to develop citywide. And so we fashioned a proposal, working with your staff and my staff, that will take this citywide, and we'll do so in a very thoughtful, deliberate manner. And so I'm happy that we move this matter and that we look forward to moving the next item.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, but question about this, not so much for this particular one, but in terms of how the precedent works. Does the state actually require an in lieu option?
The state or the court, right?
Or the court? I mean, is it required?
Craig Weber, planning staff. I'm not aware of what the state provisions are with regard to in lieu. Certainly, the specific plan itself does have an in lieu option, similar to the housing linkage fee, which also is a fee requirement, but there's a fee exemption when projects include actual dwelling units in lieu. But I'm unaware of what the state provisions are around in lieu.
So we don't necessarily have to have in lieu requirements.
Again, I'm not intimately familiar with the state provisions that guide that, so I couldn't comment whether or not it's a requirement.
Because what I also wonder, is it possible that these kind of changes are going to result only in payments but not actual units built?
So there was actually a lot of discussion in particular about the in lieu fees. So this specific plan and the amendment before the committee was specifically crafted to maintain the specific plan's prior in lieu amount, which is a much higher amount that is meant to actually cause the direct creation of individual units, versus allowing a lesser fee through the existing housing linkage fee. So the desire was to make sure that the in lieu option was not the more attractive option and that projects are actually providing units on site.
Okay. Yeah, just because I think about this in context of not just here, but we're trying to do this in my area as well, trying to create a inclusionary housing, but not have these off ramps for that are more attractive for in lieu payments that never actually get built.
Certainly.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Blumenfeld. Hearing nothing from the other members, Mr. Cedillo has moved. I'll second. And hearing no objection, we'll ask that this be sent to council with a request to come back with language for an ordinance.
Yes, to request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance. Council.
Yes. Thank you. That takes us to item number 11. Thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo.
And item 11, Councilman, is a motion Cedillo Harris Dawson. Interrelated to the prior item, it's asking Housing and the City Planning Department to come back with policy recommendations to promote fair, share, and equitable distribution of affordable housing on a citywide basis.
All right. We have a report from staff on this.
Good afternoon, Craig Weber, City Planning staff. Again, no report, though we have reviewed the motion, and we look forward to an opportunity to provide this committee information about how the motion and the city's citywide and community planning program can address the issues involved in the motion. So we look forward to providing a subsequent report.
All right. Discussion, members, before we go to public comment, or we can go to public comment and come back. It looks like the pleasure is to go to public comment, so we'll go with Karina Zadaran, Alexis Smith, Christine Ronhell, Mike Malloy.
11. Item 11.
On item number 11, yes.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Karina Sadaran, and I'm a member of Unite Here Local 11, the housing crisis in LA's worst problem. That's why I support this motion. We need affordable housing in all neighborhoods of our city, particular areas that are close to good jobs. I live La Mirada City, very far from where I work, because I cannot afford housing near my job. That's why we need to support this motion to ensure all neighborhoods do their fair share and produce to the affordable housing we need. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Christine Rangel with the Building Industry Association. If we are serious about affordable housing, we must make it a voluntary incentive-based program. You get expensive housing where the land is expensive. You get affordable housing where the land is less expensive. Therefore, if you want affordable housing in the areas where the land is expensive, making affordable units mandatory only increases cost, which will only cause the developer to abandon the expensive areas in favor of cheaper land, further exacerbating the problem. However, if you create an incentive-based program in the areas where you wish to see affordable units, builders will take advantage of the incentives and build the affordable housing because it allows their projects to pencil out. If you want to see evidence of this, look no further than the TOC program. In the last quarter of 2018, 80% of planning applications have been for TOC projects. Conversely, about everything else has become unaffordable to build in the rest of the city. We strongly encourage a voluntary incentive-based program, and we look forward to working with you on it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'm a member of Unite Here Local 11. I'm here because the housing crisis in LA is LA's worst problem. That's why I'm going to be supporting the motion for inclusionary zoning. We need affordable housing in all neighborhoods of our city, particularly areas close to good jobs. I live 26 miles away from my job, so commuting is a bit of a problem. Because I live so far and there's housing not actually close, it's actually kind of expensive. The 83% is between $1,500 and $2,000. That makes it the problem more inflated for me to even get close. What I'm basically asking you guys is that I want a fair LA, and I want to produce affordable housing in LA, and that's what I'm asking you guys for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that exhausts public comment. Comments or questions, members? Mr. Cedillo?
I want to thank your staff for working with my staff. I appreciate the collaborative nature. We have a proposed language, and the only thing we were adding is we'd like to see a response August 6, 2019. The first paragraph, second paragraph, that we expect to report back also at that time.
Excellent. So we'll accept the amendment of the maker of the motion. And if there's no other comments, Mr. Smith, Mr. Price, Mr. Blumenfield.
Is this language in lieu of the? Is it replacing the in lieu fee? I'm not understanding it. Let's see. With the council, is it replacing the in lieu fee?
No.
No. I mean the linkage fee. No, it's not. Okay.
No.
Good.
This was doing what we were talking about on the last item.
Yep.
So we're asking staff to come back to us with options on this matter.
Right, and then I believe Councilman Cedillo fine-tuned and modified the directive in his original motion, and the new language has been distributed to the city clerk.
All right. So that new language is before us?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. That takes us to item number 12 and 13.
Yes, they're interrelated. Councilman, item 12 is a report from city planning. It's on the administrative guidelines for home sharing, and it also includes an appendix 8 of which delineate those guidelines. Item 13 is also a report from city planning It's in response to a motion by Council Members West and Krikorian, which is asking for specifics on the monitoring system and the registration system for hosting platforms.
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. My name is Matt Gillespie. I'm with the Department of City Planning. We're glad to be back to provide a couple updates on the implementation of the home sharing ordinance, which was adopted, as you know, in December last year and is set to become effective on July 1st, 2019. We do have two items before you. The first relates to a draft home sharing administrative guidelines, which includes an Appendix A that requires the council resolution to become effective. The second item is a report on various implementation questions, including a demonstration of the home sharing registration portal that will become live on July 1st. First, on the administrative guidelines, just as an introduction, there has been a lot of conversation about the registration process in anticipation of the July 1st effective date of the ordinance. The administrative guidelines clarify a few of those dates. So let me walk through those just to be clear. July 1st is the effective date of the home sharing ordinance and the date our online registration portal will be launched. This is the first day when hosts will be allowed to register. To clarify, we will not require that hosts have registered prior to July 1st, as that is the date the portal will become available. The enforcement date will begin on November 1st, 2019, as outlined in the guidelines, and that's the date by hosts are required to have completed the registration process and post those numbers on their website, and enforcement will begin. So to summarize, there will be a 120-day grace period, and the key date by which hosts are required to register is November 1st. So to proceed with the administrative guidelines, which are identified in the home sharing ordinance as a document promulgated by the Department of City Planning, which may include but are not limited to application requirements, interpretations, conditions, reporting requirements, enforcement procedures, etc., needed to implement the provisions of the ordinance. When the City Council adopted the home sharing ordinance, it instructed the department to report back to this Plum Committee on the completion of the administrative guidelines prior to the implementation date of the home sharing program in order to review and approve the hosting platform responsibilities component of the guidelines, which is called out as Appendix A. The purpose of the administrative guidelines is to offer greater detail and clarity on how exactly the home sharing program will function. As such, the guidelines may be modified by the Director of Planning from time to time in order to best assist with implementation. Key to enforcement of the ordinance is the requirement of hosts to apply for a registration number with the city and then post that registration number on all listings, which allows the city to track bookings up to the cap identified in the ordinance. As noted throughout the home sharing adoption process, an IT, information technology vendor, is needed in order to efficiently create a registration system as part of the ordinance. City Council approved funding to enter into a contract with an IT vendor in April 2019, and that contract was recorded with the vendor in May, allowing the city to begin work in earnest on creating a tailored online registration system. Once this online registration portal was designed, the administrative guidelines were able to be completed. I'll just lay out a couple critical provisions of the guidelines. First, the timing and rollout, which I've already emphasized. We're beginning on July 1st. We're calling that the implementation date. That's the date when hosts can begin to use our portal, which we will demonstrate for you in a minute. Then the guidelines also talk about an enforcement date, which begins 120 days later, November 1st, when enforcement will begin. Also, to assist with public awareness and compliance with the program, during the first 60 days of the implementation phase, the department will conduct additional targeted outreach to provide information and encourage hosts to register prior to the enforcement date. This is referred to as the outreach phase. Information on how to register will continue to be available throughout the 120-day phase-in period. Regarding the online registration portal, the guidelines also provide information regarding the new online registration portal to assist hosts in completing an application for home sharing. Specifically, Section 3 of the guidelines lists the types of documents and the documentation that is required to satisfy the eligibility requirements and register for home sharing. The first component of the registration system is the identification documents. Generally, 2 forms of primary residency documentation are required. A total of 6 different forms of documentation are included for potential use by applicants in addition to a photo ID, and include documents such as insurance forms, vehicle registration certificates, voter ID, pay stubs, etc. The online registration portal will automatically query existing city databases to confirm eligibility. This includes querying a list of properties subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, the RSO, affordability requirements, as well as those with open citations from our fellow enforcement agencies. So we'll be checking those data points on the back end through the system, as we'll demonstrate in a second. Other information that the ordinance requires of the host will be verified through an affidavit that the host will electronically sign under the penalty of perjury. If an applicant successfully completes the application, pays the $89 registration fee, and is determined to be eligible based on the query of city databases, they will receive a pending registration number, which allows the host to place that number on their listings and begin hosting legally immediately. To emphasize, the pending registration number will allow hosts to legally begin participating in home sharing. The department will manually review the residency documents and other submitted information to ensure compliance before a final registration number is issued. If the automatic registration system identifies that the application does not meet one or more of the requirements, for example, because the unit is located in a building with an open code citation or because the building is subject to the RSO, then the applicant will be notified before finalizing the application and paying the fee. If the applicant feels there's an error or the issue has already been resolved, they may proceed by providing information to the city through the portal to evaluate the application through a manual review. In summary, applicants will still be permitted to apply for registration number and submit documentation to the city for review, even if it's determined to be ineligible based on an open citation or affordable housing status, etc. But a manual review can occur at that point. Additional detail is provided in the guidelines, including how to renew and apply for extended home sharing, as well as how suspensions and other enforcement actions work. There's various host responsibilities and prohibitions are further explained. The document concludes with a list of additional resources and documents. We'll now move to the Appendix A section of the guidelines, which, as specified in the ordinance, must be adopted by City Council resolution. Appendix A is the portion of the guidelines that describes how hosting platforms, such as Airbnb, HomeAway, and VRBO, may satisfy their responsibilities under the ordinance. Just as a note of background, staff has met with the major hosting platforms operating in Los Angeles throughout this process to understand what the needs of the platforms are in order to comply with the registration requirements. We appreciate all the comments that have been submitted by the platforms, and every time a new comment was shared, staff has met with the platforms to better understand their concerns and discuss. As a result, many of the hosting platforms' comments were incorporated into the Appendix A before you. The hosting platform responsibilities section of the home sharing ordinance, LAMC section 1222A32F, holds platforms responsible for several activities, including completing only authorized booking transactions for short-term rentals and providing certain information on listings and bookings to the city on a regular basis. By way of background, when City Council adopted the home sharing ordinance, a provision was added to alternatively allow hosting platforms to be exempt from these requirements in the ordinance just described if, one, they comply with the administrative guidelines that describe how a platform may satisfy those requirements, or two, enters into a platform agreement with the city. Appendix A of the administrative guidelines before you details how a platform may satisfy the requirements of the ordinance per that first option, and staff is also working with the city attorney on a master platform agreement that will be shared with council at a later date. Appendix A provides two sets of options for platforms to satisfy their responsibilities. Both rely on the city maintaining a current white list, or a list of approved registration numbers by listing. The first option in Appendix A, we're calling the API method, relies on an automated communication of data between the city and platforms using software called an Application Programming Interface, or API. This method offers significant benefits for both the city and the platforms in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, and therefore incentivizes compliance. Platforms would work with the city to establish an API connection that queries the city's database for valid registration numbers at the time of each booking transaction. The platform would then provide information on the number of nights booked, as well as the host name, host ID, and street address and registration number being used. The second option, which we're calling the manual spreadsheet option, is based on a series of data sharing processes between the city and platforms. The platform would essentially provide information on their listings to the city on a regular basis, and the city would respond with a notification of any unpermitted listings. Once identified, hosting platforms may not allow those listings to be booked after 2 business days of notification by the city. Both methods aim to achieve the same objective as hosting platform responsibilities identified in the ordinance. That concludes our presentation for the first item. We can move right into the second item, item 13 if you'd like, or we can stop now for discussion.
Let's move to the second item. And then, are we going to have someone from ITA?
Yes, right at the end of...
Got it.
At the end of, sorry,
Okay.
We'll have the demonstration right upon my conclusion, and I believe ITA staff is here to answer any questions.
All right. You're the choreographer. We're the audience, so take it away.
So we'll move on to the second item, item 13, which is a report prepared in response to a Budget and Finance Committee report amended by the City Council that provides instructions on 5 items to the department relative to the administration and implementation of the home sharing ordinance. The motion also includes directions on 1 additional item to the ITA department, who I believe is also here to answer questions. The recommendations are listed below with the department's report on each of the following. The ITA report is provided separately under the council file. The first item for motion 20A instructed the planning department provide council with a demonstration of the registration online monitoring system that is being developed before the full implementation of the program begins. The department, along with the department's third-party vendor, Host Compliance LLC, is prepared today to provide a demonstration of the online registration portal that is being developed for the implementation, and we can have that at the conclusion. Second, the department was instructed to report on how it plans to phase in the registration of potentially 30,000 hosts, including a timetable for enforcement. As stated previously and as described in the guidelines, enforcement of the home sharing ordinance will not commence until November 1st. The online registration system is designed to anticipate a worst-case scenario application load. Once application registration begins on July 1st, the 120-day open registration period also allows hosts to understand the registration system and gather necessary paperwork during this time. Again, we anticipate registration to be available to everyone on July 1st. Third, the department was instructed to report with a public education campaign before the home sharing program is fully implemented, including how a citizen may make complaints and when a host may be out of compliance, as well as information for potential hosts and hosting platforms so they fully understand the ordinance. The department began providing information to the public on the adopted ordinance by issuing updated frequently asked questions on its webpage in February 2019. The FAQ reflects the information in the final adopted ordinance and provides basic provisions of the ordinance in a condensed manner. A second major component of the department's outreach is the launch of the home sharing website, planning.lacity.org, which you have in front of you. So we have now a new home sharing landing page for all stakeholders in Los Angeles, where we've tried to provide condensed information on the ordinance. The website includes the necessary information hosts need to register, including a link and instructions how to use the online registration portal, the application fees, payment requirements, FAQs, and other information needed. The website provides user-friendly information to ensure hosts has everything they need to apply before they start the process. The department has also been preparing a full rollout of a robust public information campaign anticipated to occur during the public outreach phase, which is the first 60 days following July 1st, as outlined in the guidelines. The public outreach phase will be conducted prior to the enforcement date to ensure that all parties are provided with the appropriate information and ample time to complete the registration process. Targeted outreach and education materials will be advertised and shared with hosts and the general public, including anticipated videos, other online resources so hosts can easily understand the new regulations and registration requirements. Key to this outreach phase is the ability to contact hosts operating in Los Angeles. The department already has established a large public home sharing email address database based on interested party communications and maintains a large contact list of interested parties. The department will collaborate with hosting platforms to reach a broader audience to provide accurate information on the ordinance and how to report violations and come into compliance. The home sharing website, administrative guidelines also include information needed for a constituent to file a complaint with the city when a host is potentially out of compliance, including a 24/7 complaint hotline, which is operated by Host Compliance, as well as the various regulations and prohibitions that are in place to address any potential nuisances that may result from home sharing. The home sharing complaint hotline is already operational and can be accessed at 213-267-7788, and that's available on our webpage. An additional online reporting system is being developed and should be available in the coming weeks. Lastly, the department was instructed to work with hosting platforms and hosts to educate them about the registration requirements. As stated, the department has had recent discussions with the interested hosting platforms operating in the city of Los Angeles regarding the rollout of the registration portal and the platform obligations. In addition, the ordinance requires that all platforms contact the department within 45 days of the July 1st effective date to provide contact information and begin that dialogue where it hasn't already begun. This will allow discussions with all platforms to occur before enforcement begins, which will include information on how platforms can satisfy the platform responsibilities, as well as how the administrative guidelines and platform agreements can complement the ordinance. We'll now turn to the brief demonstration of how the registration portal works, if that is the Commission President. And to answer any technical questions, how the portal will function. Thank you. Sorry, let me introduce the vendor we're working with, Ehrlich Binzer with Host Compliance LLC. He'll be walking you through the portal.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Ulrich Binzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Host Compliance, the vendor chosen for this project. As Matt showed you, there is an online website that the planning department has put up that gives you all the information you need about how to register for short-term rentals here in the city. And as part of that, there is also an online registration form. The way that works is that you get essentially directed to this page by clicking a link, and it gives you 3 different options. The first thing is you can register for a home sharing permit. That's the flow we'll go through here shortly. If you are already registered, you can also provide the city with updated information on what websites you are listing your short-term rental on. And thirdly, if you are a landlord and would like to add your property to what we call the blacklist to prevent short-term rentals at this address, you can do that as well. So the first part is the online registration portion. And before people even get started, we want to just confirm that they really are eligible so we don't end up wasting their time. So we are going to ask them to click a few boxes here to basically confirm that they meet all of the eligibility requirements in the ordinance. And they can read more about it if they don't know all about that at this point. From there on, we will then actually go into the registration process. The first step of that is to confirm that the person who is trying to apply is indeed a primary resident. And in this case, we'll say that is the case. The ordinance also has different rules for ADUs. In this case, we will say that this is a normal residence. It's not an ADU. Then it will ask you whether or not you are the owner of the property or a tenant. And the reason why we ask that is that the ordinance have different requirements for the types of documentation you can provide to prove your residency, whether or not you're the owner or the tenant. In this case, we'll say you're the owner. To streamline the process, we have also designed a system whereby applicants can upload a picture of their driver's license, and we'll extract information from that to prove their primary residency. So in this case, we'll do that. And we will also, before they do that, confirm that they have at least one other type of documentation. So for example, a vehicle registration that shows the name and home address of the applicant. From there on, we will actually ask them to upload a image, so just a photo captured with the person's cell phone or scanner of the front and back of the driver's license. And when you click next, what you will see is that we have actually extracted all the information from that picture. By doing that, we eliminate the need to enter anything, and we also verify that it actually matches the home address of the applicant. If there is an error, we can obviously allow the applicant to correct that. In this case, we'll say the information is correct. Then there will be a question about whether or not there is a unit number associated with this rental unit. In this case, we'll say no. And then just in case people do have a P.O. box or other type of secondary mailing address, we will ask for the mailing address as well. Then we will ask for the applicant's phone number and their email address so the department can easily communicate with the applicant. And then, as the ordinance prescribes, we are going to ask who is the local responsible contact person for this particular short-term rental unit. In most cases, that will be the applicant themselves, so we'll just allow them to click yes. If they click no, they can type in another person. Then we ask how many habitable rooms there are, and if they are already registered with the Department of Finance to pay TOT. In this case, we'll say no, which is going to be the majority. Then we will ask them whether or not they're already advertising online on any of the short-term rental platforms. If they say yes, we're going to ask for the specific URLs of those listings. If they say no, we'll just ask them which websites they do plan to use for advertising their short-term rental. And from there on, we're just going to ask them to upload that one extra document, which is the document to further evidence that they are indeed the primary residents of this property. Then, as a final step, we're going to ask them to essentially pay, and they can pay either using a bank account using ACH or a credit or debit card. and to validate and verify all the information that was already submitted. Also, as Matt described, there is a online electronically signed affidavit whereby the applicant affirms that they do meet all of the requirements of the ordinance, and that's going to be electronically signed here. Finally, we just ask them to provide their bank information or credit card information, and what we're doing here is we're using a test demo credit card. So when you click submit, what you will see is that a actual pending registration number was issued right on the spot right there. That means the applicant can take this number, put them on their online listings, and be right in business. Happy to answer any questions you may have about the registration process.
All right, members, we've got about several dozen people on the queue for public comment. We're going to try to take 10 minutes on each side for supportive and opposed. But before we do that, I want to make sure everybody's okay going straight into public comment before our discussions. All right. It seems like we're affirmed on that. All right. All right. We have a representative from Council District 7.
Good afternoon, committee members. Paula Basiñana here on behalf of Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez. Here to advocate for the immediate adoption of the administrative and implementation plan for the home sharing ordinance. As presented before you today, the Councilwoman feels that it is overdue and a necessary step to protect the city's limited housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If folks could line up when I call your name in order so that we can get through this in a timely manner. You'll have a minute to speak on items 12 and 13, should you have signed up for both. Judy Goldberg, Lissa Jones, Wade Trimmer, Greg Spiegel, Gina Charusambat. If I called you, come on up. There's no point in waiting. Let's do it.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Goldman, co-founder of Keep Neighborhoods First. I'd first of all like to thank the Planning Department for all of their wonderful hard work on getting the city ready to implement and enforce the home sharing ordinance. And I'm here today to strongly urge you, to make sure that this ordinance goes into effect as planned on July 1st, including all of the terms and conditions. It's time. This went into effect 6 months ago. We've been working on it since 2013. I strongly urge you to make sure this goes into effect July 1st. Our city, as you know, is suffering from a drastic shortage of housing and ridiculously high rents. Implementation of this ordinance will assist in increasing long-term housing and lowering those rents. We've seen that once other cities have implemented their rules, many units have returned to the long-term housing market and rents have actually gone down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Jones. I work with Venice Community Housing, and I'm also a tenant in Venice. VCH strongly supports regulations to home sharing and short-term rentals, primarily because of the negative impact on rent-stabilized housing in Venice and other neighborhoods throughout the city. Additionally, the ordinance provides fair and straightforward guidelines that allow for reasonable home sharing. We are so glad to see that the city is on the verge of implementing this important policy that addresses a portion of the massive housing preservation and tenant rights issues contributing to LA's housing crisis. We strongly support the implementation reports from City Planning and urge you to approve them today and move forward without any changes. We also urge the city to continue to expand existing enforcements to stop illegal home building, short-term rental, and restore rent-stabilized units back into the housing market, which can and should be done separately from the implementation of the new ordinance. Lastly, there should be no pilot project to include rent-stabilized units in home sharing until, at a minimum, the new policy is fully implemented
Thank you.
and evaluated.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Wade Trummer. I'm the Executive Director of Housing and Homeless Services with the National Health Foundation. Many of you are aware of my long-term commitment to improving the lives of our neighbors experiencing homelessness. My message to you is simple. Homelessness in Los Angeles will not be slowed down without first stabilizing the rental market. There's an absolute correlation between rising rents and homelessness, and it is a major reason why so many individuals and families are on the streets. It can't be ignored that the unregulated and unenforced short-term rental market industry has contributed to this. Homelessness, of course, is a complex issue, and our city is trying to fight this on many fronts, but this issue cannot be overlooked. The ordinance must be implemented and enforcement must start as soon as possible in order to bring back housing units taken off the long-term market. I urge you to approve the item and start to take back control. Thank you.
Hello, Greg Spiegel, Inner City Law Center. Our critical lack of housing is such a difficult and expensive problem to address, yet today you have the opportunity to restore thousands of permanent housing units back on the market to house Angelinos instead of being a cheap hotel for out-of-towners. Please do the right thing and pass the guidelines to restore thousands of units for permanent housing. Every day you delay is a day too long. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana Sanchez, Brian Averill, Carlos Aguiar, Alice Stanford. Any one of you, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Averill. I'm a member of the Venice Neighborhood Council. To be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of the council, but for myself and my neighbors. My building, the Ellison, I've watched over the last 5 years go from 60 residentially zoned, rent-stabilized apartments to 9 of us sort of hanging on for dear life at this point. A lot of us looked to July 1st as sort of a ray of hope, if you will, when this law was going to kick in and we were going to get our neighborhood back. That's sounding sort of up in the air at this point, and that's a gut punch to Venice. Not only Venice, the whole city. There are 1,500 rent-stabilized apartments being rented out for short-term rentals right now in Venice alone, not to mention a humanitarian crisis with the homelessness and a housing crisis. We need to get those apartments back on the market as soon as possible, and I implore you to help us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My comments actually address items 12 and 14, so if you don't mind, they will be combined. Carlos Aguilar, Coalition for Economic Survival. It has been nearly 4 years since we began discussing our regulations of home sharing, and just as we reach the fruits of our long labor, we have efforts to carve out special circumstances for exemptions. Renters of Los Angeles deserve efforts that don't amount to bait and switch. We cannot allow an ordinance that will protect thousands of LA residents to be undermined before it even gets implemented. The ordinance was meant to protect renters from displacement and help those who cannot find housing because landlords are choosing short-term house sharing versus making their units available for long-term renters. Unregulated home sharing has dire consequences for the community. Things are not as idyllic with beautiful sunsets and lots of laughter as the glossy brochures and ads show. The housing crisis is real. Homelessness problem is real. We need real leadership and solutions now. We strongly oppose the motion and urge you to provide a no vote on the proposal and allow for protections intended under the proposed ordinance to take effect. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Sanchez, and I'm a member of the United Here Local 11. As you know, we are suffering from a terrible housing crisis in our city. That's why we need immediate action against very short-term rentals that take housing off the market. And by doing more houses affordable to our people, they'll create less homelessness in the streets, and they'll make our city look better in a way, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alice Stanford. I'm a proud member of Unite Here Local 11. As you know, we're suffering from a terrible homeless crisis in our city, and that's why we need immediate action against unfair short-term rentals that take housing off the market. In my apartment building, I'm not covered under rent control, and my rent went up $400 a month last year. Many folks in my building had to move out after living there for years. Please do not delay. Please do not delay. We need this law now.
Reina Gutierrez Diaz. Reina. All right. John Choi. Melanie Algas. Peggy Sturdivant. Leslie Hope. Yes, sir, Mr. Choi.
Good afternoon, John Choi with Airbnb. Let me be clear, Airbnb supports the city's efforts to implement its short-term laws. However, it should look to the experiences of other cities that have launched their own systems. The city prefers an API system that will automatically share info between Airbnb and the city. We understand it will take the city about 2 months to build their system. Airbnb has never built the type of system the city wants, and it may take us several months on our end, if not more, to build. We won't know for sure until we've had the opportunity to examine and understand the city's system. In San Francisco, we spent 9 months of negotiations and intense planning with the city's Office of Short-Term Rentals to implement a new registration enforcement scheme before the system went live. San Francisco has approximately 8,000 Airbnb listings, and applications routinely take 10 to 12 months to process today. In Seattle, that same process took 18 months, and Seattle has approximately 9,500 Airbnb listings. Both of these cities are magnitudes smaller than the host community here in Los Angeles, where we have approximately 30,000 listings. We desire to continue to collaborate, but we urge the city to be prudent and allow for a reasonable amount of time for the city staff, its vendors, and online platforms like Airbnb to have an opportunity to comply.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Melanie Algas. My husband and I have been homeowners in Woodland Hills for over 27 years. We've rented out a private room for over 3 years to help cover the cost of his health care. With July 1st only 2 weeks away, the state is premature given the lack of certainty on several issues. For instance, if a booking was received earlier this year for late November, does a host need to qualify for extended home sharing to honor their reservation if they've already exceeded 120 days? While planning has taken 6 months to draft guidelines, hosts don't have the luxury of time. We need to accept every booking to cover the cost of everyday living. Another point of concern, the process for notifying neighbors is inconvenient and intrusive. Do I have to go knocking on doors to find out complete names? And then after that, do I need to go downtown to hand over this personal information? I urge you to delay.
Thank you. That's your time.
I'm Leslie Hope. I host in Santa Monica Canyon. Your report states, quote, the home sharing ordinance provides for the creation of home sharing administrative guidelines to aid its implementation and offer greater clarity to the public on how the program will function, end quote. Nothing in these guidelines is clear. For example, the ITA report about how our information is protected isn't even available for this meeting. Hosts want to comply, but can only do so with time to understand the requirements. Many cities have had severe technical challenges in setting up a workable registration system that only delays implementation of the ordinance. Meanwhile, confusion reigns. I encourage the committee to delay registration until a workable system is in place so that enrollment doesn't turn into a fiasco like the marijuana dispensary licensing or waste management contract did. Let's get this right.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peggy Sturdivant, and I've been standing here for 3 years. I am here to just ask for a delay, basically because it looks like you're penalizing the primary homeowners and not who I am in agreement with should not be doing it. You guys have, I just heard 2013 We've got 13 days before this law, you want to take this and make this effective. You issued it on June 13th. This is reminding me of Friday the 13th, a horror story. Everything is 13. It's not fair. The first thing on there says file and pay. You guys want us to pay. I'm a baby boomer. It's going to take me a long time. My 66 years here, I don't understand the IT. You guys have ordered a host compliance LLC. Who's paying them? What are you doing with all the $40 million that we've given, that we've allowed the city to get from doing our homes? Stop penalizing the primary homeowners.
Thank you. Ed Coleman. You gotta hold the applause, folks. We gotta get through the speakers. Ed Coleman, Jeff Cowan, Justin Eckhouse, Matt Middlebrook, Tim Snober.
Ed Coleman. In the 4 years since the Planning Department unveiled the proposals for this law, you have heard from thousands of people like this who have shared stories of how vital home sharing is for their economic survival. It helps them pay their mortgages, to care for ailing relatives, to keep from losing their homes. Because our Constitution guarantees us freedom of speech, you are obligated to let us speak. But you are also obligated to listen to us, the people who elect you. It is apparent that you have not heard us, but merely rubber-stamped those proposals. As time went on, this punitive law became even more restrictive with exorbitant fees. It is a crushing blow to those thousands of people who depend on this income every month. Now, with less than 2 weeks to the launch date, this law is not even finalized. It is said there is never enough time to do it right, but always enough time to do it over. Why not take a little more time and delay the launch to do it right instead of wasting time, money, and public trust to do it over?
Councilmember, my name is Matt Middlebrook with Airbnb. I've worked on a number of these registrations for our company in other cities. And we're committed to being a good partner, and we appreciate the hard work that staff has put in to date. The ordinance provides platforms 3 ways to comply. Follow the ordinance, follow the admin rules, or comply with a platform agreement. We did not receive the draft admin rules until 4 days ago and did not receive a platform agreement at all. We've received no technical documentation for the site, and as a result, we have had no chance to inform the hosts of requirements. We are being asked to comply, but have not been provided the tools to do so. The city has suggested that it launch its system on July 1st and that there will be a 120-day grace period until enforcement begins. We feel strongly, given the lack of information that we see from the city, despite repeated requests, that the 120-day clock should not start ticking until the admin rule guidelines and platform agreement are finalized and we have the AP documentation to understand technically how the system works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin Eckhouse from Airbnb. I work on the product and engineering team. I just want to talk about what we need to build out the integration with system. So we're going to need full API documentation and a test environment before we can actually start building. Building software integration like this is like building a house. And right now we're in a situation where we're asked to build a house without building codes or architectural plans, and it's not going to be able to achieve anyone's goal in doing this. So I just want to make sure that before we start that we have full documentation so we can assess how long it takes, who are the right people to build it, and work on building that out. Thank you.
Excuse me. Hi, my name is Jeff Cowan. I manage Airbnbs here in Los Angeles. I was born here. I was raised here. I'm really proud that Airbnb brings in, I think it's an estimated something like $50 million in taxes to the city. The amount of, it's incredible. Honestly, the amount of housing units that are actually coming off the market that are actually full-time, more than 180 days, is very minuscule. And if Airbnb and all the vacation rentals disappeared today, housing prices would not go down tomorrow. I promise you that. What I encourage you to do is to look at progressive cities like Chicago that regulate vacation rentals. It's very, very important to bring it above ground and not below ground. Someone brought up marijuana. It's the same exact thing. You need to regulate it and tax it. Use that $50 million a year that's coming in for the homeless problem. Use that for affordable housing. I'm begging you to be progressive with it. regulate it, bring it above ground, tax it, and use that money efficiently and help the people of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Steve Ducey. Steve Ducey.
Hi, Steve Ducey. I'm an organizer of Ground Game LA. I'm also on the board of the Central Hollywood Neighborhood Council, but not speaking on their behalf today. Urge you to move forward with this as soon as possible. As a resident of Hollywood, there are about 2,000 plus Airbnb listings in my neighborhood. A lot of them are rent-stabilized buildings that have been completely converted into full-time Airbnbs that should be long-term rentals. And if you look at a map at the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, you'll see that the number of Ellis Act evictions in Hollywood versus the amount of Airbnb listings, they kind of overlap a little bit, which is a little concerning. So I think it's urgent that we get this out ASAP, July 1st. There's no need to delay on this. I think it's pretty ludicrous that Airbnb is up here complaining that they can't handle this. They've done this plenty of times before. They're a big corporation. I think they're going to be fine. So I think it's urgent that we get these units back on the rental housing market and get people into apartments and get tourists into the 10,000 hotel rooms that we're building throughout the city. Thank you.
All right, that'll conclude our public comment on this matter. Then it concludes our time. I want to go now to members, and I'll begin with our Vice Chair, Mr. Bob Blumenfield.
Great, thank you very much. I agree with a lot of what was said by the public, interestingly, on both sides of this issue, in that I do think we need to get short-term rental out of the shadows. We need to, we don't want people living and operating illegally as is the case now. We want to get that tax revenue and move this forward so that it can be legal, taxed appropriately, and used appropriately. A couple of questions. What platforms have actually approached the city interested in a platform agreement?
Sure. Matt Kolesny, City Planning. I wouldn't say that any platform has necessarily approached the city. We've had conversations just as the course of talking with the major platforms about the platform agreement. It's, I'll be honest, sometimes hard to gauge their exact interest, and because they do have various options. They could just follow these guidelines in Appendix A, or they could go for the platform agreement. So it's been more of a dialogue around timing and what those would look like, and the specific provisions. It's still a little unclear to us what exact platforms.
Do we know how many platforms will be meeting the requirements using the manual spreadsheet?
I believe the manual spreadsheet option, we provide two options. The manual spreadsheet option is kind of the low-tech version in a way. We think that every platform should be able to comply with basically sending us a spreadsheet of their listings and getting a spreadsheet back from us. So we believe every platform should be able to do that that option. The other option, API, is a little more technically advanced and may not be suitable for every platform.
So the spreadsheet option is there for anyone to use. Right. Is there anything, I'm hearing that it's difficult to comply with and those issues. Is there anything that we are asking in Appendix A that has not been asked in other cities? That Airbnb and the others are not currently already doing in other cities?
In terms of the data being exchanged through that portal, no. Interestingly, the API option doesn't require as much information as even the ordinance requires, and that's because it's such an efficient system that we don't need the full address, we don't need the full name if the API system is working as appropriately. So it's actually less information that's in our ordinance, which is less information than we've seen in many other ordinances across the country.
So ours is not more complicated than others, it's less complicated than others. Is that correct?
I believe that we're offering a superior option and an option that works for both platforms and cities. Yeah.
Of course it is. Thank you. One of my constituents came up and talked about the process of notifying neighbors, that wasn't very clear, or that is difficult. Is there not an easy process if you're going to go to the home extended model to notify the neighbors? Because I heard the concern and I want to make sure it's addressed.
Yes, thank you. Happy to address that. And that is something that is called out and has more detail in these guidelines, searching for the page, but under the extended home sharing section, which is where that applies. So if people are doing regular home sharing, there's no notification. But if you're doing extended home sharing, which begins on page 13, there is a requirement to notify your adjacent and abutting owners, and spells out what exactly that process is. Essentially, it's working with the city's normal mailing vendor. They're called Better Technology Corporation, or BTC, and they do this for a living. They create mailing labels. And so essentially, we're just asking you to contact BTC, tell them your address. They will create the labels. You can also do it yourself if you want to save some money, but they offer full service to create those labels. And then
you don't have to go around knocking on doors or doing any of that. It's automated. You press a button, you get the labels, and you send it out. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite as just pressing a button, but it's working with a company to do the hard work of finding the actual names and addresses of your neighbors, and then all we ask is that you pay them and show us the receipt that you've paid them, and they'll handle the mail out and everything else. Yeah.
Okay. Another concern I heard, and which is a legitimate one, about if you're renting for more than 30 days, theoretically that shouldn't count against your limits because that's not short-term rental, but you may be using the platform to go more than 30 days. How is that accommodated, or is it yet?
Yes, that's one of the unique and kind of technical, difficult aspects that we had to solve for, and that is addressed in Appendix A, where when we request information from platforms on all their listings, they're able to tell us, okay, these listings are doing 30 days or more. There's also the same question arises with like hotels and bed and breakfasts that are legitimate, that may be on Airbnb, but they're not subject to this ordinance because they're a regular hotel. We're just asking them to identify those for us as non-home sharing residences because they're more than 30 days. We would then sort of put those in a separate pile, probably do some verification that that's actually true. But there's a solution where platforms identify, and obviously hosts would identify, and platforms would identify those, and the city would have that information. There's also a solution for some residences that mix. They do some less than 30 days and some more than 30 days. We have a solution for that as well.
But that's accounted for. That's already built into the system.
That's accounted for and built into Appendix A. That's correct.
Okay. There've been concerns about the sensitive data. Could you explain how the city's going to handle the host data and how that compares to other sensitive data that we deal with?
Sure, and this might be a time to turn to our colleagues in the ITA who prepared a report on privacy and cybersecurity issues. To summarize, we feel like we're using best practices. We've submitted host compliance to work with ITA and show them the systems they have in place to protect private information, but I'll turn it over to ITA if you'd like.
Ryan Norwell, Information Security Office, ITA. Yes, so with respect to the system, it's hosted in AWS. Nothing will be hosted in the city infrastructure, and the solution will be maintained by the vendor. With that in mind, we found that there are 4 areas of concern for cybersecurity. At the application level, this would be attacks direct to the application, attempting to steal data such as SQL injection or cross-site scripting. System-level attacks, these would be your attacks to the infrastructure or the OS directly. And then intercepting communications, this is a type of attack where you insert yourself in between the user and the vendor system hosted in AWS. And the final being a denial of service, where there's a coordinated attack attempting to overwhelm resources of the system. With this in mind, the following key controls are being provided by the vendor. Data encryption. All host data is encrypted both in transit and at rest. All payment processing information is being handled by a third-party service provider that has been audited by an independent PCI qualified security assessor. In addition, this vendor is of the highest level of that the payment industry allows for.
I guess without getting into the details of the technology, but just are you confident that we have the technology in place? I mean, compared to other cities that are already up and doing this, are we on par or better or worse in terms of our ability to handle the sensitive data?
Yes, and we've made additional recommendations working with the city attorney to make sure that not only in addition to what they have in place, the ITA or the city planning will be allowed to conduct periodic vulnerability assessments of the system, as well as put language into the contract where the vendor will notify us of a data breach or of any changes to the system.
I mean, I guess I would assume that as a city of LA, as sophisticated as we are, that we're probably in a better place than a lot of small cities that are already moving forward with this kind of platform.
I would agree.
Okay. And then more generally, you wanted to hear about the education and outreach process for implementation and enforcement. Are we going to have media outreach, advertising, coordinating with a platform? How is that going to work in terms of between now and the 120 days?
Sure, Matt Kolesny, Planning. We walked through a little bit of that. I think all of those techniques we mentioned. Our website is probably the primary way to get the word out. So we're planning, I just had a meeting with social media strategies to sort of get the word out through social media, working directly with the list of emails that we've accumulated over the last 4 years, thousands of emails. Working with platforms is critical. We certainly hope, and we've had those discussions with platforms, to use their capabilities to reach their users. We intend to work together on messaging through the outreach phase beginning in 60 days. I think we're talking about videos, webinars, how to use the system, videos to be online so folks can see it sort of done in real time. So we're looking at a range of strategies to get the word out in the 60-day outreach phase.
Do we have the staff and the resources ready to roll this out?
Yes, I certainly on the outreach, I might turn, because staffing is sort of changing on a day-to-day basis, I might turn to our deputy director to give the latest on
And
staff.
not just about the education outreach, but the entire system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Arthi Marma, Department of City Planning. Yes, we do have the staffing resources in place. We're in the process of hiring the staff that we currently have the positions for and looking for next year's fiscal year budget where we have the positions as well for extended.
In essence, what we do is we will move existing people into the home sharing unit, and then we backfill their positions.
And how long does it take to review each application, and how long will it take to do all the applications?
Yeah. Matt Kolesny, Planning. We've done some estimates. We feel we've got a really efficient system where a lot of the things that may otherwise require manual review about, are they in the RSO as their citations, we've automated that using existing city databases. And so the amount of review is fairly limited to really the residency documents. We feel like we've given some estimates, basically just verifying some residency documents, an average of about 3 to 5 minutes each. That would get us to about 800 a week per person. We've sort of done the math and believe that we've got the staffing sufficient to clear the amount of applications we expect.
Right, and I don't want to take up too much more time, but just what progress has been made in terms of the signing of the platform agreements with the different parties? What does that review process entail? And what's the timeline for getting those platform agreements to council for approval? And then I'll stop it.
Yes, thank you, Matt Kolesny, Planning. So the platform agreement, we felt it was best to put out these Appendix A first that has two options, to have a dialogue with platforms about those two options and how they work with the platforms, and basically pick that option and further refine it in that master platform agreement. So we felt it was first appropriate to get the Appendix A out there approved, and from that we essentially take that portion, the API portion, I believe is what we are going to recommend in that platform agreements, put that into a platform agreement. It's more of an agreement, it's more of a legal document, but so we've got our city attorney office working on that. We're happy to get that to you as soon as possible. And I think that's our next main priority, and we should have that very soon for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo.
I'll pass right now.
Mr. Price.
Thank you for all the hard work that's going on with this, advocates, staff, and others. I certainly join those who want to get this out as quickly as possible, get it implemented, get it rolling. Aside from the just a couple of questions. Aside from the spreadsheet, we're developing this interactive platform from scratch, or are we modeling it after another city, or how are these platforms evolving?
Yeah, Appendix A has sort of two options. As I said, there's sort of the high-tech IPI,
API,
A low-tech spreadsheet.
excuse me. And then the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is what we've seen from other cities. That is very similar to what San Francisco has been negotiated. Their settlement agreement with Airbnb and HomeAway was very similar to that kind of agreement. That's what we've seen in other cities. It's more standard. The API, to my knowledge, has not been fully implemented in another city. So we'd be a bit of an innovator, but based on our discussions with platforms and our consultants and other cities, it seems to be, again, a very efficient, effective method if we can get it built and get it going, and we're confident that we can.
And what are the penalties for non-compliance? And how does that work out? If someone is not in compliance, and are they fined once, fined twice?
Sure.
What penalties?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So beginning on the enforcement date, which is November 1st, we will begin monitoring all platforms operating in the city, 50-plus platforms doing short-term rentals in the city, using our vendor, who has the capability to monitor. They would be monitoring all listings and checking for registration numbers on those listings, providing a list to the city weekly of listings without those registration numbers. We would send them a warning letter saying, hey, we noticed you don't have your registration number, please comply or take it down in 30 days. We would check again after those 30 days have expired, and if it's still not in compliance, at that point we would send sort of a case file to our enforcement agencies who would verify it, and then we would send what's being looked at today is a ACE, an administrative citation enforcement ticket, and that is a $500 fine for listing without a registration number.
Just a one-time fine, or?
It's sort of a little different than our normal order to comply. So we're looking at using this ACE program that's been used by some other. It's used by the police department. It's used by Rec and Parks. It's sort of a ticket. It has a built-in appeal process through the Office of City Attorney. The Office of City Attorney would really be sort of that issuing body of that final ACE citation of $500 for listing unpermitted. But there would be a warning. There would be plenty of opportunity for them to come into compliance before that.
Then finally, what are the prospects for revenue? I know the first half of the year, or the second half of this year, I should say, and then for the full year next year, what projections are we making?
In terms of the TOT revenue?
Yes.
It's not my area of expertise. I believe the budget accounted for 50 or 60 million. I believe that's based on prior projections. I wouldn't speculate beyond that. It's just it's not my area of expertise.
For a full year's 50?
That's for a year of TOT, correct.
Okay, that's all. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith is good to go. So again, I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for all of your work. I think there were lots of good and clear comments on both sides of the issue. It seemed like a little bit of a false either or here, but I guess the main point of controversy is the implementation of the enforcement mechanisms. So we have November 1st as a date. You have put before us some more work that needs to be done. What happens if that work isn't done by November 1st?
Thank you. Great question. So the guidelines plan for that. We think it's important to have a target date we're all working for to get the work that needs to be done accomplished, but recognizing that if the API, for example, the build out is not fully operational and tested and everyone's feeling good about it, by that 120-day date, the department in the guidelines has the ability to stretch that at the department's discretion to a later date. If we're just technologically not there yet with the solutions envisioned in the Appendix A. So we think it's important to have a goal, but we can also stretch.
Arthi Varma, Department of City Planning, just to follow up on that. The Appendix A of the administrative guidelines provides one alternative method to comply with the hosting platform responsibilities in the ordinance. The registration system is built. It'll be ready July 1st. So if there's no platform agreement or the Appendix A is not adopted, we can continue to enforce on November 1st. Those two things are just alternative ways for hosting platforms to comply with the responsibilities in the ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
And
if I understand correctly, Matt, you said something about related to this, that Airbnb, because of the settlement agreement in San Francisco, they're using the spreadsheet method there already. So they have that
alternative is something that they currently already do in our northern sister city?
That's my understanding, correct, sir. Yeah.
Okay, so worst case scenario, that's the option that's there, that's proven.
All right. So anything further on this, Mr.?
No, I just think that it's clear that we have administrative guidelines. They go into effect July. We have a system that'll be up and running July 1st, which gives us the ability to enforce on November 1st. So for us, it's fairly clear under the existing system regardless of what happens with Appendix A.
Okay. And so I guess what do we gain in, just to dig a little deeper on this, what do we gain and lose with the items that are not done yet? Because it sounds like we're saying we can go forward with or without these items. So I guess I'm wondering what value they add if we do finish them.
Arthi Varma, Department of City Planning. Yes, we can move forward. The requirements that are listed of hosting platforms in the ordinance are effective July 1st. The Appendix A would offer hosting platforms an alternative way to comply. So, the hosting platforms include, the responsibilities include some, data sharing, taking down of bookings, ensuring bookings do not occur in conflict with the ordinance. So those requirements would be effective July 1st. Appendix A and or a platform agreement that could be brought forth to the council in the future would identify alternative ways for hosting platforms to comply with those responsibilities. So methods that would work for the particular hosting platforms that work with their systems.
Sorry, I might just add, what we lose potentially if we don't move forward with Appendix A is the ability to kind of have the rules to be and start to build the systems out. And Arthi's absolutely correct. We will be fine without that, but we think there's benefits to actually building those technological solutions, and having the rules set will allow us to actually build. You can't start building the technology unless you know what the requirements of the system are. So as long as that's outstanding, we can't really go on to the next step of building. That said, Arthi's absolutely correct. We will enforce this ordinance, but we won't have some of the sort of beneficial things that we think are in those appendices.
So it sounds like that what's primarily lost is automation.
Correct.
Right? And so we're using a spreadsheet, which no one should have to use in 2019. But effectively, the process can be followed with what we have today. So what we saw on the screen today, is that live now, or will it go live July 1st? Is it all ready to go? Are people using it already?
We're going to open the doors on that July 1st. It's ready to go. It could be, but July 1st is the launch date that we're anticipating.
Maybe we open it early. Something of this magnitude is we're likely to discover things that we didn't anticipate. So if we open it early,
we're happy to take a look at that. I think that we've always promised July 1st is the date. Remember, we have 4 months to implement,
sure,
120 days. And so we feel confident in the July 1st date.
Okay, if it's ready now, I just wonder. Other questions and comments, members? All right, so we've got 2 items before us. Oh, Mr. Cedillo.
I just want to make sure we do this right. I agree with you. If it's ready, we should go forward. But if it's not, then we shouldn't. And I feel the same way about the discussion around Appendix A. If we're ready to go forward and we have a system in place to do this, then why are we even having a discussion about Appendix A? If it has no value, then we shouldn't have a discussion. Conversely, if it does have value, if it enhances our ability to serve the people of Los Angeles and address this problem, then we should address it. It seems to me, for example, HERE is the legitimate representative of working men and women in hotels. If they are involved in negotiations, we wouldn't open up a hotel until those negotiations were done. We know that. And if they said, look, we're not prepared yet, we're close, we're in negotiations, but we're not settled, HERE has that right to represent the men and women of their industry. On the other hand, conversely, there's this whole industry here that's new. And they have a representative, and we're engaged in negotiations. Why would we then go forward unless we we're confident or we're sure that we can conclude those negotiations. Unless you tell me that those negotiations, Appendix A, has no value, then why are we engaged in it? So it either does have value, and if it does, it merits its due time and due process, and if it doesn't, then we should just proceed. So it's either or, I think, in this instance. If there is some value in this negotiation, then we've got to respect it. Just as we would HERE. They're involved in the negotiations. We wouldn't move forward. We wouldn't be opening up the hotel. We wouldn't be utilizing it. There would be no banquets there. And we've got to respect that. This is unnecessary. I see this. I see this as an unnecessary divide and fight, Mr. Chairman. I look to you for your leadership because you have a rich history of bringing people together. But these are working people and working people. These are renters and homeowners who are stressed. This is not, there's no villains here. There are people here who are trying to survive and utilizing. The men and women of Local 11 are here trying to utilize their resources to protect their quality of life. And we have a lot of responsibilities to them. But the homeowners that are here are also trying to protect their quality of life. It's a smaller percentage. We're up to about 80% of our city is RSO. So we're talking about a small piece. And given that this is a small piece, it just seems to me that we should start promptly. I agree with you. But that if it's not resolved on the back end, we've got to pay attention to that. And so there's got to be some place in between here. I mean, I don't know the state of negotiations with the industry. I mean, are you engaging them? Have you received proposals? Are we close? Is this I'm involved in negotiations to try to protect 120 units of housing in Chinatown. I could tell you the state of those negotiations. I could tell you where we're at. I can tell you the resources. That's for 120. This is about a smaller percent of this whole situation that we're talking about. Like, where are we in those negotiations? And do you see us coming to a conclusion? Right? Are these fruitful negotiations? And if they are fruitful, then what weight should we give considerations to that?
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Comments?
Sure, Matt Kolesny. I'll just say that we have, as I mentioned, we've been in discussions with the major platforms. We've asked further feedback on the proposals. We've gotten feedback. We incorporated many of the issues. When we've most recently met with major platforms, we asked them, are there any remaining issues you see in the text? And we were not able to identify any additional problems, any additional remaining concerns. So we feel we've got what we're happy with, and we don't know that of any specific concerns from the major platforms. But that's on the Appendix A. With a master platform agreement, that may be more of a negotiation, more of a legal document. We thought it was important to get Appendix A correct. We believe we're there, and then move on to a negotiation. And that actually will come in front of City Council as well.
What's your best experience and practices with other cities when you're in these negotiations? Right? I mean, HERE negotiates with the hotel industry throughout the country and have experiences and practices and uniform agreements. Cannot those experiences and practices apply that worked in Seattle, worked in others, Chicago and other major cities, so that there is a resolution that's one that Los Angeles could build upon?
Absolutely. Councilmember, we've took a lot of time to figure out what has worked and what's not working in other cities, and have talked directly with our colleagues and other major cities that have been in similar negotiations, similar ordinance writing processes, certain similar enforcement conversations. We feel like we've learned from the best of them. We learned from their mistakes. We feel like we're actually bringing forward best practices in this document, and feel like we're actually going to set the new bar for other cities based on what we've learned.
Did those include, in those other cities, did they go forward without the agreements, or did they conclude agreements with the industry?
I mean, every city's different. Not all of them had this sort of arrangement that's sitting in front of us today with administrative guidelines, but there's always a political process, and again, we've tried to learn from the best of that.
That's not responsive to my question. Did they go forward without the agreements, or did they go forward with agreements with the industry?
I believe that in some cities, agreement was not able to be found, and there were lawsuits. There are many lawsuits in other cities, other major cities, sued by the major platforms.
But did they go forward? Is the question.
Well, if they're under litigation, then they're under litigation.
No. I'm saying you could go forward and get sued, or you could not go forward and get sued. Which one did they do?
San Francisco went forward, correct?
Many cities like San Francisco, New York, went ahead with regulations, even sort of knowing they were going to get sued, and were sued. Santa Monica, similarly, Boston. Some cities have backed down under the threat of litigation and have done other things. But we think we've tried to strike the balance, not be unnecessarily strict, but have common sense regulations.
And I should add, those cities that went forward and they were sued, those cities won. All of those cities won their the lawsuits, and they moved forward without the platform. We don't need a platform agreement to move forward. We want to get a platform agreement because that's in everyone's interest, and we should do that. But I don't see any reason why we need to wait for that. We've seen what's happened in other cities. They've been able to move forward successfully, and we need to bring this industry out of the shadows and legalize it, and do it in a way that we need to move forward with these regulations. Otherwise, the status quo is that they're not legal right now, and that's not in anybody's interest. So we want to move forward. As far as I'm concerned, platform agreement would be great, but it's not necessary to move forward. And other cities, as you said, have done it. San Francisco, Santa Monica, et cetera.
So a question about the platform agreement, and I'm an amateur on this, so hopefully you can help educate me. The way I've heard you describe the platform agreement, the primary beneficiary of that is the company that owns the platform.
Matt Gillespie.
Because I guess, or another way, I'll ask the question in reverse. How does a platform agreement help neighbors, hosts, and communities?
Arthi Varma, City Planning, I'll just jump in here. The platform agreement is, you're correct, an optional method for hosting platforms to comply. We've been meeting with some of the hosting platforms, such as Airbnb, to talk about not the platform agreement yet, but the components in the administrative guidelines that relate to alternative compliance. And we're happy to continue to have those discussions with Airbnb to see if you can incorporate those into a platform agreement. But again, as you mentioned earlier, it's an alternative way to make the data sharing simpler, but the process can move forward without it. That said, we're happy to continue to have our discussions.
All right. So if I think we've exhausted the points of view on this matter thoroughly, so I want to move us forward. So I'll move that we note and file item number 13, and then on item number 12.
Mr. Chair, could I finish my comment?
Sure, Mr. Cedillo, by all means.
Well, only that I appreciate your leadership on this matter. It seems to me that we're prepared to move forward, and I don't want to be dilatory in any way, but I do want to be fair at the same time that that we should, if there is value in pursuing the agreement with the platform, that then we should insist that then be completed.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily prevents us from going forward today, but that there is value in that, and that should be something that we get done, and that it should get done before the state in 120 days or whatever date we're looking at.
Well, I think Mr. Cedillo, with certainly your insight on this matter, I was prepared to propose that we ask planning to come back to us well in advance of November 1st so that we can get a report on how that process is going. And that way there are regular and public reports rather than private discussions between the platform and the city. That we make that process as public as we can So, I'd like to propose it in 30 days. You come back, you tell us where we are. It gives an opportunity for public comment from the companies. They can tell us where they are, and we can keep this in the light of day, and move it out of the shadows.
I second that.
We're in recess for 30 days, and I'm not coming back for that. So, 60 days for the first report back, and then we'll do intermittent report backs until it's done. So that again, we do this open and in public for everyone to see how the process is going. Mr. Blumenfeld, Field.
Thank you. I agree with that. And I just want to clarify that we do that, but we don't make enforcement contingent on the agreement, because once you make it contingent, you create a perverse incentive to come to an agreement, because folks may have an agreement to not have an interest in not enforcing it. So I completely agree in terms of the light of day that we make that, get those report backs and see how this is going, do everything in our power to facilitate an agreement, but I want to make it very clear that there's no contingency here.
No, I think that's fine. I'm not prepared to make an instruction, but I do think we'd gain a lot by starting early since this system is live. We can see how live it is. I mean, very, very big companies and big institutions like the Department of United States Health and Human Services went live with a healthcare portal that didn't work. So if we could get it early, that I think it would be useful, and I don't see no harm in doing that. But I'll leave that to the discretion of the folks doing the work on the ground. So, Mr. Mejia, we have language before us that asks us to approve the administrative guidelines, noting that these can be amended as necessary by the Director of Planning. We want a whole consideration of Appendix A in committee, including the resolution to adopt Appendix A of the home sharing administrative guidelines, which includes the platform responsibilities, with a report back from the Department of City Planning in 60 days with a draft of the platform agreement. We'll request that the Department of City Planning and IT report back in 60 days with the status on registrations following the proposed launch on July 1st, an update of the administrative and technical implementation of the host platform responsibilities, including a report on the proposed build-out and any other technical issues pertaining to the function of the host registration system following the launch on July 1st. Yes. With strong encouragement from the council that if the system is in fact ready, make it live. All right, it's been seconded by Mr. Smith, enthusiastically. It's been seconded by Mr. Smith and Mr. Cedillo. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. All right, thank you, everybody.
And on
Thank you,
item
Mr.
13, that was a note and file, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is a great legislative process. No applause. No one's happy. So it's excellent work we've done on our part. Right.
Moving right along. Mr. Chairman, I got to go.
Yeah, sure we did. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Item number 14.
Yes, item 14, Councilman, it's a motion of Farrell Wesson. It's instructing city planning and city attorney to come back with a pilot program for CD 13 that would regulate home sharing in primary residence that are subject to the RSO.
All right, Mr. Glesney, you got anything on this? If not, we'll ask our colleague to join us at the center table. The maker of this motion, the one and only Mr. Mitchell Farrell of Echo Park and
Silver
parts
Lake,
surrounding.
East Hollywood, Glassell Park,
14.
Atwater Village, and Elysian Valley. A little bit of Koreatown and a little bit of Little Armenia.
If I can ask folks as they're leaving if they could respect that we're still in a meeting and we're trying to hear from our esteemed colleague. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I am here today to reiterate the following. Stabilizing the rental market is essential in Los Angeles. Our recent homeless count provides a clear window into the crises, evidenced by significant new numbers of people experiencing homelessness for the first time. It's not rocket science. This is due to skyrocketing rents and low wages. I applaud and support all of the great work by the homeless housing advocates, the affordable housing advocates, the home sharing participants, the Department of City Planning, you, my colleagues on the Plum Committee, and I'm eager to see this ordinance go into effect as soon as we can possibly get it up and running, which will hopefully result in a significant net gain of RSO units across the city, mainly because of the ban on apartment buildings conversions. I am here because the ordinance as written leaves out a sizable universe of people living in owner-occupied RSO units. In fact, a few motions introduced last December by myself, by you, Mr. Chair, by you, Mr. Cedillo, all seconded by Council President Wesson, attempted to reconcile this challenge, this omission. There's a universe of people that own and live in a home, but have a number of accessory dwelling units built previous to 1979. They are, by definition, under the rent control ordinance and will be prohibited from participating in home share in their units with this ordinance as adopted. I will be very clear in my intent here. The ordinance, as I said, as written, prohibits the owner-occupiers from participating in the sharing economy in their unit solely because their unit is older. Allowing them to participate would not displace any of their tenants in the other units. These owner-occupied individuals include seniors on fixed incomes, disabled individuals, and new homeowners with mortgage obligations where home sharing in their unit was factored into their finances. So, colleagues, what I'd like to do is one of two things. Amend the motion 18-1245 to state owner-occupied units of homes covered in the RSO, or identify the 13th District as a pilot project under the regulations of my motion as modified, if the council chooses not to include this provision citywide. So the motion would read, would regulate home sharing in owner-occupied residences subject to the rent stabilization ordinance. Now, I probably can't make that since I'm not on the committee, but that's what I'm recommending. Let's not leave these folks who have come to council meetings over the last 6-7 months and beyond, several of your committee hearings, and we've heard from them. When we introduced these motions in December, I was getting several dozens of phone calls a day specific to this issue, and we continue to get them. My staff is handling those types of phone calls almost on a daily basis because we're about to enforce and leave, like I mentioned, this universe of people out of the mix. And I think that's a real, we have an obligation to take a good look at that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell. So we got a lot of comments on this. I got 11 people on this queue, but I want to ask Department of City Planning if they want to comment on this before we go to public comment.
No, just that we're happy to follow up with the council office and to help define the program and get the information.
Okay. Thank you. Chris Ganser, Heather Santora, Judy Goldberg, Bill Prilucci, Brian Averill, Alicia Jones, Megan Choi.
Mr. Chairman, this point of reference, was there a motion to include that language?
Mr. O'Farrell, if you can submit that language, and then we can figure out which one of us can do that. Are you proposing to make such a...
I'll be happy to make the motion, and I wish I could stay here to vote on it because I think it's the right thing to do, but I do have an appointment I have to go to. So I'd urge my colleagues to support it, if not at least as a test, if not citywide.
Okay, so we got those amendments. We'll get the language.
Thank you.
And go forward. Yeah.
Hello? There you go. Before you start the clock, I was actually supposed to speak on the last thing, but the staff said speak on this one because they kind of overlap.
You got it.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chris Ganzer. I've been in my home in Silver Lake for 21 years. For the first 12 years, I tried to make ends meet by having roommates and working in TV, but it wasn't enough, and if not for renting the 4 bedrooms in my house short term, I would have lost my home in the recession. My medical expenses are unbearable. $3,000 a month for this Triumeq, Triumeq, if you want to Google it, okay? I don't own apartment buildings. I've never displaced anyone. I'm just an Angelino trying not to lose my home. I'm a longtime member of my community. I'm one of the oldest neighbors on my block. And Mr. Blumenfeld, I absolutely do not allow parties. Okay? I never imagined that doing this would make me one day the target of an orchestrated attack by Marriott, Starwood, and even Trump. But now, with its dystopian Matthew Glesney limit of 1 room and essentially telling me who I'm to live with, the financial hardship will force me to sell my house and move out of LA. So I'm begging you one last time, please have some compassion for people in my situation. Please allow me to share all the bedrooms in my home, or at least let me continue until springtime so I can make a house ready to market for a fair price and have some dignity while I am displaced from Los Angeles and my home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy Goldman, Goldman. I'm here to ask you, please, to uphold the prohibition on all RSO units in all districts, as we've seen so many tenants who've been harassed out of their apartments with absolutely no protections. The owner-occupied units that you're talking about now that just got thrown into this, there are very few of these that are legitimate. We've been doing a lot of on-the-ground look at this, and this is just a workaround that would undermine all of the wonderful hard work that's gone into this ordinance and the vote that you just did to pass it. So we need to stop the unlawful conduct of these greedy landlords, and we need to do everything possible to enforce the home sharing rules that protect tenants that you just passed. We've been fighting to save RSO units from greedy landlords who continue to kick out long-term tenants to make more money on short-term rentals.
Thank you.
Don't be fooled.
Time.
Hello, my name is Megan Choi. I'm an organizer with Ground Game Los Angeles. I'm here to speak against
A little closer to the mic, Ms. Choi.
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
I'm here to speak against the short-term rental pilot program in District 13. District 13 is already incredibly vulnerable to displacement. In Hollywood, where I work and live, there's an area median income of $33,700 annually. Rent is already pushing people to the breaking point, and we're seeing a massive loss in long-term housing stock everywhere. Tenants in Hollywood deserve protection too. They should not be excluded. They should not be sacrificed for visitors and corporate interests. Tenants and renters in this market have very little choices. We have to do what we can to protect the RSOs that exist.
Thank you.
Hello again, Brian Averill. I'm just here in support of my Hollywood neighbors who I feel like if anyone can understand what Venice is going through right now, it's folks in Hollywood. To have a pilot program to throw RSOs back on the short-term market seems indefensible to me. Again, we're in the midst of the homeless crisis, the affordable housing crisis, and I don't know how you put RSOs back on the short-term market. It makes no sense to me. If you were to put all the RSOs back on the market, homelessness goes down and rent prices go down. That is a no-brainer. Thank you.
Bill Przlecki, People Organized for Westside Renewal and Ground Game. I have to respond to the motion as it was written in the agenda, which does not appear to sound like what Councilmember O'Farrell actually shared with this inclusion of owner-occupied. I would say we absolutely have to proceed with caution. One of the areas where we work is in Venice. Another area is Hollywood, but in Venice, where we have regulated rental housing in other ways with the Mello Act, it is not a stretch to see outright fabrications of ownership. It's sometimes tough to prove. I would not underestimate the lengths people will go to play dirty in a system when you come between a property owner and their money, but we need to be prioritizing protecting tenants and err on the side of protecting tenants. I would recommend leaving RSO protections intact and continuing to discuss this option further. Thank you.
Carlos Aguilar, Steve Ducey, Mr. Bayless.
Hi, Steve Ducey again, organizer with Ground Game LA, also board member, Central Hollywood Neighborhood Council. Again, not speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Council. I want to echo the sentiments from the folks before me. I think it's a very slippery slope and a dangerous suggestion that we should put rent-stabilized units back on the short-term rental market. In looking at the public comment that was already delivered on this motion and the council file, a lot of the people that were in support of this were people who own 4 units. It was like, oh, you know, is that owner occupied? That like I have an apartment building and it's a 4 multi-unit RSO building. That's now owner occupied, and I can rent out those other 3 units on short-term rental under this carve out. I think it's misguided. I think that we're even considering it before that this is going before this policy's even been implemented is a little silly as well. You know, like I said, I live in Hollywood. 2,000 Airbnb listings. A lot of them are RSO buildings, and I really just don't think that this is a good idea. So thank you.
All right, I got Heather Santora, Lissa Jones, Carlos Aguilar, and Mr. Bayless. Oh, you're going the other way. All right, so that closes public comments on this item. Discussion, members, or discussion from our Department of Planning, City Planning.
Arthi Verma, Department of City Planning. I just wanted to clarify the motion calls for recommendations on a pilot program in the CD13 boundaries. From a planning perspective, we might recommend considering a different set of geography boundaries rather than the council district as a whole.
Right.
Oh, that wasn't what Mr. O'Farrell suggested. He's saying citywide.
For us, I just want to be sure we can work in terms of just the general boundaries of where you'd like to do it, and it's really a matter of how we collect data. So we want to make sure that since this is this is a pilot program, and we'll be measuring it against certain data, which was in, I think, part of the motion. So we just want to make sure that we're a little bit flexible in terms of what the area is.
Yes, Mr. Blumenfield.
What I heard Mr. O'Farrell asked for, and the part that I'm sympathetic to, I don't like the idea of a pilot program. Okay. I don't like the idea of cutting in a particular geography. However, and I've talked to Mr. O'Farrell about this, I see the need for, and I don't like the idea of changing RSO units. I don't think that they should, there's a reason they're subsidized apartments, they shouldn't be being used for short-term rental. However, the owner of that building is not a renter. The owner of that building, by definition, is paying a mortgage, not a rent. And that's what if that's the definition of an owner-occupied unit, meaning the one unit in a building where it is occupied by the person paying a mortgage, not a rent, I'm okay with exempting them across the city, not just in one district. But it has to be we have to have very clear, a very clear understanding that it's not. You can't give, we don't want to have a lot of games played where the owner gives everybody 2% of the building or something and then, find some sneaky way to get around it, because it is ripe for problems. But if it's genuinely the person paying a mortgage and not the person paying a rent, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not really a rent-stabilized apartment. It is an owner-occupied apartment, and I'm okay with us subjecting. So if that's what Mr. O'Farrell's asking for, well, I'm happy to help move that forward, but not the pilot and not rent-controlled buildings in general.
And just to sharpen it, Mr. O'Farrell, before you speak, and then we'll hear from Mr. Price or planning. It is my understanding of what you like to explore is not an owner-occupied building; it's an owner-occupied unit, which are different things. They're vastly different things. So I just want to make sure that's what you're describing.
So here's the scenario that I think many people are very familiar with, and I can give you the many dozens of buildings or homes in the 13th district, in the hundreds actually, that are under RSO. You have a home. might have 2 or 3 bedrooms. It's a full-on home, a garage perhaps, and then you might have 1, 2, 3, or 4 units on the same property. And so in that sense, the person who lives in the home owns the entire property.
But just to clarify, and maybe planning can correct me if I'm wrong on this, single-family homes are not subject to RSO.
No, we're talking, but this example, they are covered under RSO.
Your mic's not working. I'd move over.
Yeah, that's important too.
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt, but you want people to hear you.
Okay, where should I go? Here? Thank you. Thank you. So what you have, though, is by definition and by ordinance, if you have a home and then it's a duplex or you have even detached units and you own the entire property, you are under the RSO.
Right.
Right. So what I'm talking
but
about...
that's not a single-family home. That's multifamily.
Well,
I mean, a duplex is multifamily. Educate me on this, because
under RSO definition, it's multifamily. But what I'm saying is, across Los Angeles, there are individuals who have the ownership of their home with a couple of units on the same property, and that's repeated ever. On my own street it is, and they're under RSO as well. So what we're doing is we're prohibiting the owner of that home, and they're under the RSO, from engaging in home sharing themselves. I'm not talking about allowing any of the other units that are under RSO to participate. I'm just talking about the owner of the home.
So the owner-occupied unit.
Correct.
Got it.
Well, and I might be able to clarify that, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe if it's 4 fewer units, the way that you can finance that kind of purchase may be different. So there may be some buildings that have 4 fewer units where a homeowner may occupy one of those units. But keep in mind, people may own a duplex and rent out one of the units, so they own one of the units and rent out the other. I also believe if you build an ADU, let's say you have a pre-1978 house and you build a brand new ADU in the rear, your home may be subject to rent stabilization, I believe, in that particular case, and Matt can jump in if I got that one wrong. So I think there are multiple scenarios where you could actually own a unit, you could actually live and own in a unit which is subject to rent stabilization, I believe.
And Mr. Bertone, if I may just interject real quickly, I think what we're getting at too is the fear and the reality that whether it's a 4-unit building or the kind of scenario we're in, they're separate. What's happening, and a lot of the speakers talked about this, we've heard this over and over again, by the thousands, these RSO structures under the RSO are getting emptied out, right? And then they're turning into hotels. But what's really great about the ordinance is the transit occupancy residential structure. The ordinance would disallow the conversion of apartment buildings to this use. So it's very, very narrowly focused. Someone couldn't buy a house on a lot with 3 accessory dwellings whenever they were pre-1978 and then keep the other 3 turn them into a hotel. They'd be prohibited from doing that. They would by law be required to rent to renters under the RSO. They would not qualify to turn those units into home sharing. But what this ordinance would do as written is it would prohibit themselves in their owner-occupied unit from participating in the shared economy. So what you would essentially be doing by definition is penalize someone who lives in a house next door to you who's under that ordinance from someone who isn't, who might live there as well. That's what I'm getting at. And that universe of people are oftentimes seniors on a fixed income. I kind of went over that in my discussion, but we're not talking about in any way, shape, or form of watering down or eliminating the ordinance for the 13th District at all.
All right, Mr. Cedillo.
I want to applaud Mr. O'Farrell for trying to deal with nuances that are tied to this major sweeping change that we're making. The fact of the matter is, there are like groups like Blackstone, and there's big law firms and hedge funds that are exploiting a very hot market. They abuse the Alice Act. There's a lot of things that happen right now in the market that are very abusive to renters. And then there's people, seniors, family, people who got these units from their family. This is the assets of a family, a working class community. Your part of the city is particular in that. The 3 bungalows, the triplex, the duplex, I mean, it's your entire community is just a fabric of that, in which people are trying to keep their units. And this distinguishes not the other units that are being rentals that come under RSO, because that's a question of time. It's not subsidy, but it's a question of time when it was built. But there are owner-occupiers who live in their units and should not be penalized or stressed over the fact that we are making this sweeping change. And that is the target community that you're talking about. It's a small piece, it's nuance, but it's very significant because it is a question of home ownership. In fact, the banks look at it that way because the loans are fashioned as a single entity, and I think I applaud you for looking into that nuance. The chair and I have a motion that looks at the same question in a broader citywide, and that'll be coming up when we come back, but it should not delay us from moving your motion because I think it is very specific and has a very specific response to a very nuanced and targeted community, and I applaud you for that effort.
To be clear, what we're talking about today is citywide, right? It is.
Well, I think we're talking about both things. I think both things were mentioned, so I think when we get a report back, we should get a report back on both.
Okay, if we're getting a report, just for what it's worth, I'm supportive of doing it citywide for very narrowly tailored, owner-occupied, not the other units that they have, but the one that they're actually living in, if they have an extra room. But I don't like the idea of doing it for one district alone. I think it should be a city.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think if this committee decides to look at this narrow focus citywide, then I don't need a pilot project. Right.
That makes sense.
I think it would bode well for the full council to agree if the committee agrees.
So thank you, Mr. O'Farrell, and I join Mr. Cedillo in applauding you for attempting to thread the needle in this big, complicated maze of realities that we face in the city of Los Angeles, and certainly in your district, but my district has exact kinds of scenarios that you're describing, where people own outright or they inherited a building that's RSO, they live in it, they go on vacation for the summer, they're not allowed to use home sharing, and so that is not at all the intent of, I think, either the activists on either side of this or certainly the policymakers. So we have a motion before us that asks planning to help us untangle this and make some sense of it and try to, at the suggestion and direction of Mr. O'Farrell and this committee, try to thread the needle and see if we can arrive at some policy options that get at this problem. And if when we have a report back, we can both have a version that looks at a plan area that's specific to a district. It doesn't have to be 13, but a district, and what it would mean citywide, including whether or not we trigger another EIR, should we make that decision in such a broad way. All right?
Clear.
Does that make any sense to you, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, so rather than being a pilot program, it's citywide, one option for planning to come back, and the other option is to do it by whatever geography they pick, whether it's an area planning commission geography or whatnot. And then Mr. O'Farrell's amendment for the language to read owner-occupied units rather than primary residence, as originally noted in the motion.
All right, and so we'll table the...
Can I?
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's owner-occupied rather than primary. It's both owner-occupied and primary.
Yes.
It's all.
It's all. No, I just was hearing the...
Okay, I thought that the councilman had substituted to read owner-occupied units, but if the agreement is to do both, that's fine.
Here's what we mean. You own it,
yes.
You live there, and it's an RSO covered property.
Okay, so
you've got to hit all the notes.
It'll read owner-occupied primary residence.
Yes.
So it'll cover both.
Right, and the first option was not a pilot. The first option was just a citywide policy.
Yes.
The second option was the district or geographic
Whatever
pilot.
geography.
And if, I'm optimistic that we'll do this for the city, but if it does turn into a, I'm back to the non-working microphone. I'm optimistic that we're going to get there for the city with this universe. But if not, I would like the study area to be one of the project areas in the 13th.
We got you.
I think
We got you
Hollywood
on
would be
that.
a good place because it's such high incidence of home share.
All right, yeah,
Thank
excellent. All right. So we'll note and file Mr. Smith's amendment, and we will consider what's before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Mr. Blumenfield. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. All right. Where does that leave us, Mr. Mejia?
That'll take us to item 15 and 16, Councilman, which are related. Item 15 is a report from the City Planning Commission. It contains 2 appeals relative to the vesting tract map for a mixed-use project with 438 condo units. And then item 16, same appellants, and this one, they're appealing conditions 1 and 5, which are related to affordable housing requirements. So it'll...
Yes.
Good afternoon, Plum Committee. Mindy Winwood, City Planning. The project before you is for the Fig and Eighth project, proposing the demolition of an existing surface parking lot and the construction of a new 41-story, 530-foot tall mixed-use development consisting of 438 residential units and approximately 7,493 square feet of ground floor commercial, retail, and restaurant uses. On January 24th, 2019, the City Planning Commission considered the proposed project in conjunction with an appeal by the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, or SWRCC, of the related vesting tentative tract map number 74197 for the merger and re-subdivision of an approximately 50,335 square foot site to create 1 ground lot, 438 residential condominiums, and 5 commercial condominiums, in addition to a haul route for the export of 105,000 cubic yards of soil. At this meeting, the City Planning Commission denied the appeal of the tract map, found, based on their independent judgment and after consideration of the whole of the administrative record, that the project was assessed in the previously certified Fig and Eighth Project Environmental Impact Report, approved site plan review, and approved and recommended that the City Council approve the requested transfer of floor area rights, or TFAR, transfer plan and public benefits payment for the TFAR from the Los Angeles Convention Center for up to 122,480 square feet to the project site, thereby permitting a maximum 8.43 to 1 FAR in lieu of the otherwise permitted maximum of 6 to 1 FAR. In addition, the CPC modified conditions number 1 and 5 of the CPC case and condition number 17 of the VTT case, as well as the statement of overriding considerations contained in the CEQA findings for both cases, requiring that the design of the project be modified and that 5% of total units proposed be set aside for low-income households. Both decisions were subsequently appealed by the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters and the project applicant. All appeal points by the SWRCC largely repeat the same concerns that were submitted in response to the draft EIR, the final EIR, and the first-level tract appeal, arguing that the EIR fails to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, specifically with regards to inadequate analyses of air quality, greenhouse gas, noise, traffic impacts, and project alternatives, and the failure to provide proper mitigation for such impacts. In addition, this appellant argues that the TFAR request requires zone variance findings and precludes the project from being in compliance with the zoning code. Staff has provided detailed written responses to each of these appeal points, and both the appeal report dated January 24, 2019, and the appeal response letter to Plum dated June 13, 2019, which have been transmitted to the council file for your consideration. The EIR is comprehensive and has been completed in full compliance with CEQA, and the SWRCC has failed to provide any substantial evidence or new information to dispute the findings of the EIR. Furthermore, LEMC Section 14.5.6 authorizes the City Council, acting on the recommendations of the Commission, to grant transfers of floor area rights of 50,000 square feet or greater for projects located within the Central City Community Plan area in exchange for public benefits. Therefore, T4 is not considered a deviation from the permitted zoning, nor does it require a zone variance. The appeal points presented by the project applicant request that condition number 1 of the CPC case pertaining to project design modifications and conditions number 5 of the CPC case and 17 of the VTT case and the statement of overriding considerations and the CEQA findings for both cases pertaining to the additional of affordable housing be removed. On June 3, 2019, the applicant submitted a revised Exhibit A for review by the Department of City Planning, which planning staff finds meets the intent of the CPC's modified condition number 1. As such, staff recommends that the revised Exhibit A be accepted and condition number 1 be revised as shown in the letter to Plum dated June 13, 2019. Therefore, staff recommends that the Plum Committee deny the appeal by the SWRCC and modify condition number 1 of the CPC case to reflect acceptance of the revised Exhibit A and sustain the remaining recommendations set forth by the City Planning Commission. Staff would also like to make 2 corrections on the record to the LOD for the CPC case. First, condition number 4 should reference a total of 7,493 square feet of commercial floor area and not 74,963 square feet. Second, the numbering of the conditions starting from number 17 onward should be renumbered sequentially. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right. We have got
2 appeals.
2 appeals. So we have 2 appellants. Each of them will have 5 minutes or less to make their case. They can come forward. And if you all could part a little bit so I can see the clock. Perfect. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Harris Dawson and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Stuart Morkin. I'm with Mitsui Fudosan. We're the applicant for this project. And I simply wanted to state that we're proud of our investment in downtown Los Angeles for more than 30 years. We have shared the vision of the city for a revitalized downtown. And now that it's here, we have focused and refined our vision into our development application that we've worked for the last 3 years with the council office, our neighbors, community members, and labor partners to bring this forward to today. Because it's the end of the day, time is short. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Cindy Sterrett. Thank you.
You're a good man.
Council members, I'm Cindy Sterrett from Latham on behalf of Mitsui. Our appeal asks you to remove the CPC's conditions and changes to overriding considerations. These had not been recommended by the staff. The housing condition is not legally justified. These conditions were added to both the TFAR planning approvals and the track map, which is why we appealed both of them. We also oppose the Carpenters' appeals. We continue to have discussions with the Carpenters. We've reached an agreement with Creed and certainly committed to making sure this project provides public benefits. The project is ready to proceed. The enhanced design that staff has recommended is one that we've worked hard on since the CPC's comments in January. We think it's a beautiful project. Scott Johnson is here from Johnson Fain. We're excited to move forward with it. It increases the housing supply for the city close to job centers in the financial district on an existing parking lot, very close to transit, no displacement of any housing. We meet all the city's development standards, including the downtown design guidelines. We're improving the Figueroa streetscape. We have a robust public benefit package, over $10 million. $5 million of that approximately is TFAR payments. The city can use that $5 million for affordable housing and other public benefits. We're including a mid-block crosswalk to connect to the 7th and Fig shopping center across the street. People already jaywalk there from the parking lot to get to the shopping center, so this will be a tremendous safety investment. It also supports planning for the future streetcar. The conditions require alley enhancements that we've worked on with our neighbors, and we appreciate our neighbors' support as well. Working with Creed will provide thousands of high-paying construction-related jobs. LAEDC is actually here today. They've submitted an economic impact report, millions of dollars in spending that will benefit the city. The CPC condition on design, we've addressed the intent, which is why we're asking that the Exhibit A be approved today and that condition be deleted from the CPC on design because it has been satisfied. And we've submitted some graphics to you today just showing how the podium's been improved, the top of the tower's been improved, the overall design has been improved, really a wonderful project. On inclusionary housing, the CPC did not have any legal authority to impose that condition. The overriding considerations had been recommended by staff to the CPC. This project has minimal impacts, and those conditions had been recommended by staff without the new condition added by CPC. The project meets all of the city's requirements. The entitlements are minimal. There's no zone change. There's no general plan amendment. There's no height limit increase. There's no development agreement. There's no additional benefit being requested by the project. It's being built on a parking lot. It was submitted before the city adopted the housing requirements that were adopted recently. And again, that TFAR payment can be used by the city toward affordable housing. So we respectfully request that the inclusionary housing condition be removed as not legally justified, and that the city direct that TFAR funding to be used for affordable housing purposes. We ask you to support staff's recommendation on denying the opponents' appeals. The issues have been repeatedly addressed by the city and its environmental consultants, and we have also submitted to you one additional letter today from the project's CEQA consultant providing an additional clarification as to haul truck trip calculations analyzed in the EIR, and ask that that go into the record. We're proposing to invest over $400 million in downtown LA to transform this corner, and we respectfully ask that you deny the appeal of the Carpenters and grant our appeals. And if we can save our last 30 seconds to respond to any comments, we'd appreciate that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So does this exhaust our appellants? If so,
There's a second appellant,
right.
Councilman.
So if there's another appellant, have 5 minutes or less.
It's the Southwest Regional
Okay.
Council.
All right, yes.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Ted Jimenez. I'm with the Southwest Carpenters, and we stand by our appeal. Not to be redundant, and I know it's been a long afternoon, what we are asking for is that you delay the project, until the developer commits to use contractors that are going to agree to pay area standards, and they're going to utilize disadvantaged and local workers, local zip code workers. That's what we're asking for. And with the appeal, we feel that we're going to stand by that because it does express the need for further look into the appeal that we're asking about. So that's what the Carpenters are standing behind, and I'm utilizing that 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Now we have an applicant, but the applicant spoke already?
I believe the applicant already spoke.
All right. So now we have public comment. All right. Stuart Morkin, Ted Jimenez, Michael Shillstone.
And Stuart already spoke on behalf of the applicant.
Okay. Ted Jimenez. All right. Who are you?
I'm Michael Shillstone.
All right, you're on the list. Let's go.
Afternoon again. I'm with Central City Association. We're here today to support the Fig and 8th development, which will replace a long-time surface parking lot with hundreds of new housing units and retail 1 block away from the busiest transit hub in the city. The MFA team has worked closely with the community to craft a streetscape and traffic plan that promotes walkability and improved mobility overall for this bustling, multimodal area. It will create a new mid-block crossing that will connect with the Fig at 7th shopping center across the street and provide a wide pedestrian promenade on the east side of Figueroa Street. It will also include special signal timing to foster safe and efficient movement among all transportation modes and integrate with the MyFig project and planned downtown streetcar. The project's uses and thoughtful design will ultimately help stitch together this important intersection of South Park and the financial district. Thank you.
Chris Cheek, Shamari Davis, Evelyn Del Real, Danielle Morales, Gina Burnett, Godfrey Rochira. Come on up. Come on up. If I've called you, just come on up.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Evelyn Del Real, and I am a member of Arms of LA. We support this project. The project will have many positive impacts on the economy both immediate and in the future. It will support jobs, housing, and generate millions in state and local taxes that will support schools, police, and firefighters. It is exactly the type of project that should be built in downtown Los Angeles, and we strongly urge you to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Cheek. I'm here on behalf of Plumbers Local 78 in Los Angeles. We're here to support the 8th and Fig project. The project will provide over 4,500 construction jobs, and the developer has committed to paying middle-class wages with benefits that will enable our workers to provide for their families and afford rent in Los Angeles. Mitsui has also committed to a safe workspace and promoting careers in the construction industry through apprenticeship opportunities. These benefits are in addition to adding over 400 units of the housing stock. This is a much-needed project, and we hope that you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shamari Davis. I'm a business rep for IBEW, Local 11 Electricians Union, representing over 12,000 workers, and we wholly support this project. We think the 8th and Fig project is a transformative project. It will provide much-needed housing in the city of LA, and it will also make use of a currently underused site. Mitsui has been a strong supporter of local workers, and we're glad they're going to provide good-paying jobs with benefits. Let's support a more vibrant downtown with this project and more housing in the city, so let's approve this one. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Godfrey Washira, Creed, LA. In the interest of time, all that needs to be said has been said. It's all good and positive. We concur with staff recommendation and fully support the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any reactions or comments to public comment?
I think we had one person whose name wasn't called, sir.
Can you tell me your name? Who? All right, I'm going to need you to fill out a card because your name's not anywhere here. But come on and speak. Come on and speak.
I apologize. I thought I had.
Okay.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjita Mitra. I'm the director of the Institute for Applied Economics at the LADC, and we did conduct an economic impact analysis of this project. And I just wanted to present some of the key findings from what we found in our research. We found that this project during development is going to support almost 4,600 jobs with labor income of $270 million and generate $32.6 million in state and local taxes, of which $8 million will be collected by Los Angeles County and $3.6 million by local cities, primarily the city of Los Angeles. After development with ongoing activity, we found there's going to be about 330 jobs that are going to be supported, direct, indirect, and induced, and generate $8.1 million in state and local taxes, of which $1.3 million will be collected annually by local cities, including the city of Los Angeles, and generate additional $17.8 million in local spend by the new residents of this facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that exhausts public comment on this matter. Any comments from staff?
Mindy, with city planning, no comments.
Thank you so much, members. All right. We have to go into closed session at this moment. So we'll ask staff to help us clear the room.
Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. For the record, the council is going to recess into closed session pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.9D2 and 54956.9E5 to confer with its counsel relative to threatened litigation regarding this matter, specifically one potential case.
So we're back in open session.
Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. For the record, no action was taken during closed session.
All right. So if there's no further discussion, members, I'll start. I just want to make the comment in the presence of our attendees that there's no stronger city council anywhere in California, perhaps not even the nation, that is more insistent on local hire, getting our apprentices in, and making sure living wages and decent wages are paid. However, that's not what is before us at this time, and we appreciate our friends at the Carpenters for continuing to raise that issue on every front possible, but it's not what we're deciding today. Today we're deciding about a set of decisions that were made at CPC and appeals that are before us. So I will read instructions on 15 and 16 and ask for a second on both. On 15, that we denied the appeal of Nicholas Whips on behalf of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, grant the appeal on behalf of the applicant, MFA, 8th and Figueroa LLC, by modifying condition number 17 of the vesting tentative tract map consistent with the applicant letter dated June 13, 2019, modifying the environmental findings and statement of overriding considerations reflecting that amendment. Will approve the EIR, the modified environmental findings and statement of overriding considerations, adopt the mitigated monitoring program, and approve vesting tentative tract map number V as in Victory, T as in Tom, T as in Tom, -74197. So that's for item number 15. And seconded by Mr. Price.
Mindy Winwood, City Planning. Staff would like to clarify that the statement of overriding considerations should be consistent with what is shown on pages F87 and F88 of the staff recommendation report dated January 24th, 2019.
Happy to amend this instruction with that update. It's been seconded by Mr. Price. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. Then item number 16 will deny the appeal of Nicholas Whips on behalf of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, grant the appeal on behalf of the applicant and MFA, 8th and Figueroa LLC, by modifying conditions number 1 and number 5 of CPC-2016-1950, T as in Tom, D as in Drive, R as in Red, S, P as in Paul, R as in Red, consistent with the applicant letter dated June 13, 2019, approve the EIR with the modified environmental findings and statement of overriding considerations, adopt the mitigated monitoring program, and revise condition number 3CI1 that it goes towards Council District 14 Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and approve CPC-2016-1950-TDR-SPR.
In addition, Councilman, I believe there were some technical corrections that city planning made to this item that need to be approved.
So we'll incorporate those technical corrections in the order.
Mr. Chair, did you also approve the Exhibit A as recommended by staff?
Was that included in the recommendations that you all made?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we got that. Thank you. All right. I'm looking for a second. Anybody? Second. Mr. Blumenfield seconds. Hearing no discussion or objection, that'll be the order. Excellent. Thank you all very, very much. Mr. Mejia, can you confirm that this concludes our business for this evening?
This concludes our business, Councilman.
Thank you.